And we're back.
Welcome to No Direction, the Pathfinder News, Reviews, and Interviews podcast. I'm Ryan Costello.
And I'm Jefferson J. Thacker, also known as Perram.
We're doing something a little different in our episode today. We don't have a guest. We might not even have any other segments. What we're doing is answering a series of questions, but not the usual no question segment that we run where people ask us questions about the game. These are actually questions that Owen KC Stephens has just been posting out into the gamerverse. So he's got on his blog, owenkcstephens.com, actually, I'm not sure I got that right. owenkcstephens.com. I did get it right. And that's Stephens with a PH. He has been posting in groups of 10, 100 questions for RPG gamers. He's only got 40 of them posted up on the site. We are going to start with those 40. And Perram and I had the idea that we'll just kind of ask each other these questions. They're very thought-provoking questions from someone who is highly influential, highly informed in the industry. Just to give you an idea, here is the signature at the bottom of Owen's email. Owen KC Stephens, developer and Starfinder team, Paizo Incorporated, Freeport and Pathfinder developer, Green Ronin Publishing, lead project manager, Wright Publishing publisher, and Rogue Genius Games. That's true, he just became Wright Publishing's new publisher, which, I mean, that's a bittersweet thing. It's cool that Wright Publishing is going to continue to exist and have a legacy for, since it's under Owen, I'm going to say years to come.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. I mean, I can't think of anybody in the industry right now who puts in more work than Owen at the moment.
It's staggering because he's also constantly, well, maybe not constantly, but he's on Facebook often enough that I feel like I'm kept up to date with what's happening in his personal life, while he's also managing to put out this constant stream of material. First party for Paizo, third party for a number of different publishers. Like, his head for numbers and his creativity is boundless.
At this point, I think he's got a superpower on project management. Yeah. But you're awesome, Owen. We've always thought so. And your questions are kind of awesome. That's kind of why we were here doing this. The second we saw them, we were like, it would be really fun to just sort of answer these on air. So this is also an interactive segment. We've got some live chat.
Hello, chat.
Yep. Hello, blah. Now, what we would like you guys to do is, if you're able, to anytime that we have a question, feel free to type what your answers are. We will occasionally randomly select answers from the chat. Because of the nature of it, we might not be able to get every answer. And if you are viewing over the questions and you see one you want us to answer, paste that question in the chat, and we will try to get to that question. But keep in mind, these are the questions from Owen's lists of questions. And also, as a special bonus, once we are done with doing the ones that are posted on the website, Owen has provided us an advanced preview of the next 10 questions, and we will be going through those on air.
That's right. So we're going to jump around a little bit. Perram, you and I have both read the first 10 questions.
I haven't read it. I stopped at 3.
You stopped at 3? Okay. Well, I haven't read it in a couple of weeks, so I've got a vague idea of what the first 10 questions are. But the next 40 of them, I haven't even read over the ones he sent us as a preview. It could just be slandering us, and Owen apparently has been waiting for this moment to strike. But I have a lot of faith that that's not the situation.
This would be the most brilliant Machiavellian plot if it was so. I mean, I wouldn't even fault him for it at that point. I would just be like, well played, sir. Well played.
So instead of just going through the questions in order, because they also are lumped by category, so we're going to be jumping around a little bit. I have a D4, which will be my tens percentile, and a D10, and we are going to be randomly determining which questions we're going to ask.
The first question! Get to the first question!
All right. So it is 31.
Okay. What is 31?
I will ask you this question, and then it'll be your turn next. So the 31 to 40 section is story beats.
Okay.
Question 31. Name a movie you don't like that you think would be fun to play through as a role-playing game session. Name a movie you love that you think wouldn't be fun as an RPG session.
Ooh, this is really hard. I'm not too much of a movie hater.
Okay.
A movie that I really love that would make a terrible RPG session is Ocean's 11. And because I've thought about this for a while. Because Ocean's 11 is a typical heist, and you think heist in gaming works great. But the truth is that movie is full of so much perfectly minute planning and coincidence that, and a lot of Deus Ex Mechanica, that makes a great movie and would be a horrible, horrible game to run. As for a movie I hate that I think would make a great RP session, I'm gonna go with maybe the Saw movies because it's a death trap puzzle, and I hate those movies.
Why do you hate the Saw movies?
Because it's all torture porn, and I don't like the concept of violent abuse to just be violent abuse.
Okay, I don't like most torture porn, but I respect the Saw movies because there's a lot of really tight narrative, and they do some really interesting things with the whole series.
Mm-hmm. But I mean, there you're talking about like you could have with those movies though, it would make a great session because you have a cooperative group with traitor elements. You've got a lot of puzzles and set pieces in a confined environment. The only thing that's different from your typical RP session is that the illusion of power is taken away. You no longer have full agency of your actions, which makes it a great, stressful situation.
It's true. Now, on your point about Ocean's 11, I know that Margaret Weiss put out a game based on a heist TV show, and I'm trying to remember the name of the show, so I'm going to quickly IMDb it because I know that what's his face from Angel was in it. If that's ringing any bells.
Bones?
No. I believe that the character's name was Lindsay.
Oh.
Yeah, Lindsay. So Christian Kane is in it.
Oh, they've got it in
Leverage.
chat. Leverage, totally. Yep. I have that around here somewhere. I was a big fan of the show.
So it was explained to me by my friend Sean that you run the heist, but then when the adventure is over, you also then do that like flashback at the little moments you might have missed to justify how the heist works.
Oh.
So it's actually like played out once in real time and then once justifying, I guess, some of the narrative control that the players get.
That's an innovative way of handling it. Definitely very non-standard and wouldn't work in your typical Pathfinder play.
So no, it would not.
Yeah, and the system they use is the same system they used for the Firefly games.
Yeah, same as the Marvel storytelling game.
So it lends itself very well for non-traditional role playing.
Yeah, that's the one that I know in the Marvel version they've got the Doom pool. So when you roll poorly, dice get added to the dice that the GM will be rolling against you. And so you can also like voluntarily add dice to the Doom pool to make something slightly easier now, but it's going to be harder later. I always liked that system. I didn't get to play much. Actually, I only played one session of the Marvel game. But as someone who mostly just plays D20 systems, that was a system that really caught my eye and intrigued me.
Mm-hmm. We got some answers from the chat.
Cool.
Rick Flynn says that he loves Clerks, but it would be a bad game, and I agree with him. There's nothing that happens in the plot of that movie, and then he hates The Ninth Gate, good investigative supernatural thriller game. I forgot The Ninth Gate was a movie that existed.
Is that a Johnny Depp movie? In that period where Johnny Depp was doing those movies?
You've now confused me. I don't think that is the case. I thought that was the... this is where I'm going to embarrass myself in front of thousands of people. I thought it was the Schwarzenegger movie, where the supernatural Schwarzenegger movie. Rick, you'll have to save us.
End of Days.
Oh, okay. Yes.
So yeah, Ninth Gate does have Johnny Depp in it. I recognize probably the trailer, but I don't think I've actually seen the movie.
Mm-hmm. Right. So, well and fully corrected. Okay, what's
Mizrahi says bad film, great game would be Gods of Egypt. It's true, that movie that came out last year and just got completely panned and was extremely golden and white. Yeah, I remember from the it kind of has like a PG version of God of War setting. It has that kind of appeal, and I think that would be a very interesting setting for an RPG. I can see it's still just high adventure, but it's high adventure shoulder to shoulder with the gods.
Right.
So
And you would play that
the
like with a good super system. I mean, Mutants and Masterminds would be a great way to handle that.
Yeah, and I don't know if you would play. Each player controls either a mortal or a god, or if you would do the all mortal party or the all god party at your leisure, or swap it up and each player plays two characters. There's some interesting things you can do with that.
Hmm.
So a movie that I don't like, but I think would be fun to play through as a role playing session, the Super Mario movie. It was absurd, but it was absurd in a way that most of those things would be fun to like. It would be a lot of fun challenges. You're fish out of water, but you've got some skills that are foreign to that world. That world is completely bizarre. Even if you are a fan of the Super Mario Brother games, you don't know what's going on in there. There's a little bit of mafia. There's a little bit of giant dinosaurs and monsters, and just sticky goo everywhere.
This is like, it's almost blasphemy for any nerd conversation to praise this movie in any direction. I mean, this is one of the worst movies ever created. Period. That's it. It's just one of the worst movies that has ever been created.
Yeah,
But,
yeah, yeah.
I mean, it's got a weird setting, but it's a weird setting of just throwing random things at the wall. But I guess that's about half the role playing games I play.
And it is kind of what makes the Mario games work. It's just that they threw the wrong things at the wall to make it a Mario movie.
Well, let's hope that one day we get a good Mario movie. And a good Mario RPG. Maybe based off of Mario RPG.
Maybe. I don't think it's something they've ever considered. I know at one point it was like, we're never going to make something outside of... Like, they're never going to do toys or anything you could play with Mario besides the Nintendo games because they were worried about cannibalizing their audience. But since then, there have been board games. There are action figures out there.
Yeah, and it's not like Nintendo hasn't made or hasn't authorized RPGs to be created of their product. They authorized the Pokemon RPG.
It's true. But can you name a second one?
No, because the first one didn't even get all the way published. It only got the first 2 box sets made, and then it didn't make it to the 6th.
Yeah. So it'd be cool to have a Mario RPG and maybe not so much a Legend of Zelda RPG because Mario, if you go, like Mario's got a larger cast of heroes and a larger cast of archetypes for heroes. So yeah, that would be a fun RPG. I don't know, maybe we've even got somewhere that's asking for a video game that would be turned into a tabletop RPG. I never would have really thought I wanted to play a Mario RPG, but now I'm curious how that would go.
Jacob Blackman is asserting that there has never been a good movie based on a video game franchise, and I disagree.
Okay.
The only good video game movie that is actually based on just one game, as opposed to saying something like Wreck-It Ralph, which is a great movie, it has video games in it, would be the first Mortal Kombat. Not the second one. The first one is a great little kung fu action movie, over the top, in the core of the 90s. It even has Christopher Lambert in it.
I would agree with that. It's always fun to watch, like, and not even ironically, it's a fun movie. They get the look of the characters, the look of the world right, the characterization is right. I mean, it's not a game people played for the storyline, but they did actually give it a storyline and they gave everybody characters. So if you did look deeper into the game, there was more there. And that's pretty much what the movie was. That was just beyond the surface of this controversial violent fighting game.
Exactly. And which is funny because beyond the first couple of games, Mortal Kombat has a deep, rich, well-developed backstory and storyline, and it is in like the last 2, Mortal Kombat, which is Mortal Kombat 9, but they didn't call it 9. It was just called Mortal Kombat. And then Mortal Kombat X, the new one, is great. It goes through that storyline in really good detail. So, yeah, I would definitely recommend it as inspiration for pretty much any GM to just play through the storylines of those games. Especially since they finally fixed the PC versions of those games, which have been broken forever.
Jacob Blackman has a bit of a can of worms comment saying that Mortal Kombat was not its own movie. It was a ripoff of a Bruce Lee film that put the Mortal Kombat characters into it. Are we diving into this, or are we just going to be like,
I mean,
disagree?
I understand what he's going for with that, but at the same time, many great movies are just rip-offs of old movies. I mean, The Magnificent Seven is probably the most famous of these, which is
Mhm.
just Seven Samurai with cowboys. The Lion King is just Hamlet. I mean,
Funny enough, Owen KC Stephens is in chat, and he also brought up Magnificent Seven, just as you did.
yes, see? Awesome. But see, this is a long-standing tradition. I mean, you've just got to go with it. All right, so let's do the next
Also in
one.
chat, my buddy Will. Hi, Will.
Hey, Will.
He's in chat as Blind Ferret Plays. He's saying that a lot of people are saying Warcraft was a good movie. I don't know about a lot of people or good. I've heard some people thought it was okay.
Enjoyed that movie.
Okay.
But I am a Warcraft fan, and I want to put the asterisk on this. By being a Warcraft fan, didn't put blinders on me on the quality. It just meant that because I understood all the ridiculous amount of knowledge you would have to know to appreciate what this character interacting with this character meant, I could appreciate it. But if I were to go in that blind, not knowing all that backstory, I would be confused as heck. Also, Ryan, I need you to shift a little bit. You are creeping steadily off the camera. Let's do the next one. Give me a dice roll.
All right. You are asking question 17.
All right, Ryan.
Yes.
Should the GM roll dice in secret, roll dice in public view, or roll dice with varying secrecy as appropriate to the nature of the roll?
I believe the GM should roll in secret, but this is from a lifetime of gamers at the table calculating the to-hit bonus of the monster based on what I roll and what I say they hit. They're figuring out the AC. They're basically breaking down the numbers by seeing the numbers. Whereas if you've got that air of mystery behind a screen, then it forces them to treat it a little bit more like a monster and less like a game item. Now, the exception is I usually roll in public when I am playing with new players, and I give a little bit more explanation about what's going on with my rolls. Like, I use my turn as teachable moments. So, other than when I'm teaching new players, or I guess if I just feel a little like sheltered behind my wall, I almost always, when I'm GMing, GM behind the GM screen and roll in secret.
I am a secret roller too. Because I want my players to be guessing. I'm also one of those jerks that rolls a lot randomly or asks for people's skill results or skills checks and make rolls without there being any purpose to it at all. Because I need them to keep on their game. And I do that to both build tension or take away tension as I need to. The only time I will roll in public is if I am trying to force tension. Like if there's a big, like huge, beefy monster on the field that's just like doing tons of damage and it's stepped up to a character who's injured and I want that character sweating, I throw that dice in the middle of the game mat.
Sorry, I was just distracted also by Will's question. What do you think about getting people to roll for damage every time and then describe if they hit or miss, or hit and nothing happens? So I'm willing to take this as a question off of Owen's, like, away from Owen's list. I notoriously have talked down the idea that rolling the dice together adds anything to the game, rolling to hit and damage at the same time. That is a major peeve of mine. I hate when people do it together because of the story, because of the way the story unfolds in my head. When a player is rolling to hit, if they hit or miss, then I'm starting to figure out what the description. But like oftentimes, if they're rolling the damage, people then will be like, "Oh, you rolled a 1, but you rolled an 8, so you would have done this damage," and it just muddles the narrative. And I like. One thing that I had to get out of Jay's habit when he was running a swashbuckler that had just like 1,000 attacks and most of them were crits is that he would tell me the die results and then he would kind of summarize it in order of how many crits and how many regular hits and then how many misses. And now I hated that because I like being like, all right, so your first attack, you're really like, you jam him right through the leg, making him vulnerable, so you get 3 good solid stabs in. But then he manages to wiggle out, and you whiff the last one, except that you just kind of nick it, like the order that you hit and then the amount of damage that is done, and whether it's a crit or not. That is how my combats come alive. And so when somebody rolls their to hit and their damage together, it takes that away from me, and I don't think it really adds any time to the table, because the people that roll to hit and damage at the same time are warriors, and a warrior's turn will never take nearly as long as a wizard who's rolling all of his fireballs and then counting them up. Like, a warrior's turn is really fast compared to a caster's turn.
I vehemently disagree on all of that.
All of it.
All of that.
All right.
Okay.
Where do you want to start?
All right. Let's start with the easy one. The person that takes the longest at my table every single combat is the person that is doing the 40 billion attack rolls. And if they are rolling the attack roll, then they roll the damage, and then they roll the attack roll, and then they roll the damage, and they roll the attack roll, and they roll the damage. By the time it gets to about attack 7 or 8, it takes like 20 minutes. And it takes forever. Most spellcasters at my tables just throw the spell out, tell me the DC, and I have that crap resolved within 5 minutes and move on to the next one. Because you get one spell a turn unless you're doing something wonky. But
the casters at my tables are constantly something wonky.
Okay, so what do you get? You get 2, you haste and get another one? I mean, but 8 attack rolls in the slowest math going. I want them to roll that damage dice and those hits. I want them to do them all out on the table. Heck, if I could get away with it, I like it when they color coordinate. This blue D20 is with this blue D6. This green D20 is with this green D6. Just throw that all out on the table. Most of us can tally that stuff up in a few seconds. And then finally, afterwards, if they don't volunteer a description, I'll go into a description for them once we see what the results were. So that it's a cohesive description that doesn't have, like, a lot of wonkiness to the back and forth of the narrative, and then I can get on to the next player.
So there's definitely something I want to address there, but one clarification: I do have them roll all their attacks together, and then all of the damage. That will save some time versus your scenario, but if you still see that as the warriors taking the long turns, I don't know, just different from how my casters play their turns.
Oh, and opposite of what you do, yep. I give them the AC. I tell my players the AC the first time they swing at a monster.
Interesting. Why?
Because they get a... If I don't do it on the first time, I usually do it by the time they hit him. So they get a... And I don't tell them if it's changed. Like if they do something to mess up their AC, I don't tell them until they do it. But if I tell them the AC and they've sort of engaged with this creature once before they find out, and they know about how well they're doing and how well he's fighting, and judge it, that way... It only takes them a round or two to zero it in anyway. Okay, his 17 hit. They're doing it regardless of me saying it. But if I just say it out loud the second that the first attack roll goes in, then all of that we just talked about becomes super easy, because they just go, boom, okay, I know I'm just trying to hit this and he's not telling me I missed, so I can tell the GM I've got 3 hits out of 5 and here's my damage, and that is a lot easier to handle. I know I give up a little bit of mystery. I do require them to interact with the monster first before they get it, but by doing that I cut my combat times in half.
See, I also find you're losing a lot of texture, though, because if the fighter knows confidently he could power attack from the first turn, he's going to power attack from the first turn. Whereas if it's a feeling out process, then it really is like these guys are facing this mysterious creature, and it's like, well, I whacked it really hard with my main weapon, and somehow something's healing up, so then they're like, okay, they're picking up hints. Was that damage reduction? Was that just really high AC? What's happening? So maybe I'll switch up to a lighter weapon, or maybe if I'm a 2-weapon fighter, I'll focus on a single attack to not get the penalty. Like, it just becomes a much more organic combat, and it's those first couple of rounds are what is making it an organic combat. It's what's making it different from the last combat with a similar monster.
But do you know what's even more organic than spicing up that combat? Getting
No.
2 combats in that same time with a new, fresh monster.
I don't know. You're losing a lot of I'm just worried that combats will become a little more systematic, and you're losing the storyline potential of the combat itself.
Well, I think it's time for the next question. Unless we've got anybody in chat with some good points?
Looks like there's a good split between people that roll in public and roll in secret. A couple of the reasons to justify it: you roll in secret so you can fudge. Roll in secret would tip off the players to something going on, like a baddie lying to them. Varying secrecy, high drama moments are in the open. Bobson1 says he finds it much more fun to roll in public, let the player start figuring it out, and then have something happen to invalidate that knowledge. The monster starts growing, okay, attack it, and 18 hits, you think so, but no, your blade deflects away. I mean, that's not going to happen every single time. Is it Bobson1?
Bennett, agree with rolling together. Rich, Lynn, never mind. He's stepping out. Goodbye. Missouri, agreed. It's just if it's just one attack, it doesn't save a lot of time. But with iterative attack, it's what kills the time. John Bastille, never mind. And Bennett 920. He never tells them the AC. They can do the math and figure it out. It just feels less like a story. Agreed. I'm definitely lean in towards the gaming aspect of it. I just want to get through as much content per session as I can, and I already have a group that takes a lot of time. I get my storyline in when we're doing the role play and the taunts and the figuring out of the puzzles. When the dice hit the mat, we're just in full game mode.
I'm kind of bummed that Will left to eat, because Will's played in my games, and I want to know if it's just me or if he really does notice the same thing, that the casters are taking longer, or that I'm just adding more narration based on the rolls. Maybe we'll get back to this when he comes back, since it was his question. Terrible timing, Will.
All right. New question.
All right. Before I roll the dice, how's my framing? Because I feel like I'm moving around a lot.
You are moving back to the right. Soon you're going to be sitting in my room.
Weird. All right. Rolling the dice. I believe it's my turn to ask you.
It is.
Number 4. So this is a GMing question.
And what
number
on number 4?
It's number 0.
You're not rolling the damage at the same time you're rolling your attack rolls.
So it was category 1, which is jamming, and question 4.
Okay, so
do you consider altering NPC attitudes or personalities from their originally planned starting points, or changing the plot of a future game session based on an interesting idea that came up in play, to be GM fudging, or just normal GM activities, or both?
Normal GM activity. If you're not adapting your game to your players, you might as well just be reading the book. I mean, if it's set in stone, and it's super important to the game, I won't, veer from their core planned out personality too much. But I have countless times taken characters that were just bandit number 3 motivation to survive this encounter and flesh them out the second the player takes an interest in them. There's a role-playing game called, oh man, I'm having a brain fart moment. Savage Worlds. It's a great little RPG, a lightweight RPG. Very fun. If you like 3.5 gaming, you'll like it. It does the feats and stats thing, and it has a rule in it to where everybody's an extra until they get a name. So there's a joke that goes with that your players are interrogating somebody, and somebody goes, "What's your name?" The other players goes, "No, his stats got increased." So the second that any of my NPCs or characters players give them a spotlight beyond the scope of what they were wanting, they just took an interest in something in my game, and I want them to have fun, and I want them to think I thought of it. So they automatically get, a name. They automatically get interest. Or if they start to like a character, and that character is due to be written off or something like that in the plot, I will change that to make sure they stick around a little bit longer, as long as it's not suspending the disbelief too much in that direction. Good Lord, most recently did this with one of the bandit cooks in Reign of Winter. Basically became a companion NPC for most of the first book and a little bit into the second. So yeah, all the time. I don't see any problem with this. I think it's your duty as a GM to modify your game to suit the needs of your players.
Yeah, very much. This is one of the main differences between a tabletop RPG and a computer game, a video game, because what the players do, yes, there's a lot of player control in a tabletop game, and it may seem more than in a video game, but it really is. Their actions are still kind of really set by the numbers. Whereas the most fluid thing you can do is your role playing, and if like the bartender in the second bar in a city is supposed to be friendly to everyone that walks through his door, but if you know in the previous session the PC's got in a fight in the other bar in the city and burned it down, then he should be like, hey, nice to see you, nice to see you. Oh, you people. I heard about what you did in Ben's bar. No, you can't drink here. And it's like, it brings the world to life. It doesn't matter what's printed on the page. It needs to be a world that responds to what the players are doing, and to like a further degree than to respond to the responses to what the players are doing. And I know I used organic a lot in the last question, but it's the same thing. An organic, alive, role-playing world needs for the GM to be reacting to it as though the things the players are doing have happened, that they have affected the other people. And that means thanking them when they've saved them from the dragon, and it means being kind of mad at them if they just beat up an innocent guy at a fruit cart or whatever. It needs to evolve naturally. It needs to make sense as a world.
Yeah, this is also something that is a skill. Obviously, you need, if you're running a pre-written adventure, you need to make those changes with at least awareness of how it will affect the rest of the adventure going forward, as well as you can, and to do those without making your life worse or the adventure worse. I mean, if you took a major NPC and changed them drastically, and I have done this, and then not realize that 2 books later they're suddenly important, then you have to like veer, tire screech, patch in a patch, and sometimes that's fun. Then it truly becomes your own adventure. Goodness, the Town of Sandpoint that I ran in my game only has a passing familiarity with what they wrote for it. So just be careful when you do it, but definitely do it. This is something you'll get better at the more you run games.
Now, along similar lines, I remember, and I don't remember what podcast it was, but they were talking about, it was a bit about narrative control of the players. If the players walk into a room and they're meeting an NPC, and the players have kind of conspired against the GM, and they all start acting like that NPC smells, but the GM hasn't told them he smells, the book doesn't say he smells, it's just like the players decided, let's all pretend this NPC smells, we'll act like it, they'll talk about the smell in the room. How do you as the GM react to that?
Interesting. That is a now this is what I would ask. I would ask those players, I would subtly try to probe out whether they were role playing their characters as actually smelling something, or if they were rolling their characters as a con. Asking if they need to ask, do you need to make a bluff check right now? Something like that. And if probably once I'd let them do it just to encourage them doing it, and to being involved in the story and having agency. But it wouldn't be something I'd let slide all the time. I mean, if I don't have some control over the storyline and they're actively trying to alter it or conspire, that means that's not playing in good faith.
All right. How about something else? If a player incorporates into their backstory that they are destined to one day meet someone with blue eyes, and I don't know, like a elven warrior with blue eyes, and you've got another elven warrior in the story, are you good working a character that's not supposed to have any ties to the PC into that character's backstory?
I do that all the time. I also have a rule called I grab the rake.
Go on.
Okay, so because I want my characters to have some amount of agency and some amount of fun in the games, we have a rule called I grab the rake, which is if I give you a description of a room, I'm not going to be able to give you a complete versatile description of every single possible thing. And if I did, I'm doing a bad job as a GM. I should be highlighting the important things. But you should assume that if you're in a barn and it has a hayloft and I've not said anything, there's a rake nearby. When the player says, I grab the rake, it means that I'm giving them permission to make some assumptions and to insert details in the world that make sense as long as it isn't disruptive to the storyline. So it means that if you grab the rake and bar the door, you don't have to ask me, is there a rake in the barn? As long as it, unless, and I won't invalidate the choices unless it is suddenly important that I did. So, if you went for, I grabbed the rake in the barn, and I had it planned out in advance, I would say, it looks like they emptied the barn of all its tools. There's blood marks where they used to be. That would be a clue, and then they would have fun. And it's also a fun moment where they rush towards to grab something, and it's not there. That sort of scene you get in movies. But I want my players to encourage that that sort of interaction and adding to the story, so that I'm not the only one creating when we're playing.
See, I would be okay with them saying, "Is there a rake?" Like, I think that's got a lot of potential. I would most likely say yes, but I feel like I, as the GM, am in control of their sensory input, and so if they're asking if there's a rake, that's them looking around, and that's me telling them yes, because this is something you see. Whereas if they're kind of jumping to the conclusion, a rake in a barn, I guess, isn't that bad, I probably wouldn't even notice it unless it was becoming a stretch or it wasn't something I was assuming was in the room. Like, if he's in a tavern and he's like, I grabbed the mop, and I'm like, oh, I didn't say the mop was out. Wouldn't the mop be in a closet? Like, that's where I'm worried about implementing that. Go ahead.
I think you're holding on too much to your view of the world. And I understand the impulse because I had to break it. But you're saying that you're their sensory input, but you are an imperfect sensory input. You could never tell the players without some sort of bias, all the details their characters would notice and take in a room. If you had all day to describe one 10-foot by 10-foot room with a modicum of furniture in it, you could not manage a justified description of that room with all its details in a 4-hour game session.
Right.
So, since you have inaccuracies, and you're never going to be able to give all the details, unless the thing that they are inserting, the details they are inserting on top of yours, invalidates something important, then I don't see why they need permission.
Because that is how this world works. That is how I build the world. That is how I create an immersive session. Like, I am not saying that I'm not saying that how I do it is how it has to be done, but it is how I have to do it. I would not be comfortable otherwise. I would be constantly second guessing myself as a GM. Like, when I am just following my natural GM instinct, everyone's having more fun than if I'm second guessing myself.
That's a fair point. I have my own GM idiosyncrasies. Okay,
hold on. There's two specific people that came to mind when you said I grabbed the rake thing. One of them was Stone. And I know that if Stone would start an action with I grab the rake, we are in for about a 10-minute wacky scheme that Stone has been contemplating since his last turn. And I know it's going to end up, the rake is going to be used as a leverage point, and he's going to launch one goblin into another, but he's going to put like a alchemist fire on the first goblin's chest and he's just making a flaming trebuchet. And it's wonderful, but it's just every now and then Stone will be like, okay. And I'm like, all right, buckle up. Stone's having one of those turns.
I would encourage that at every chance I get.
I mean, I'll encourage it more earlier in the session, but when we're like only 2 rounds into a round, combat I'm worried is going to take the rest of the session. That's when I'm less enamored with these ideas. But yeah, then the other person that came to mind is Corey, because I feel like if Corey said I grabbed the rake, it's because he took some obscure rule that it's the rake will give him a +1 leverage bonus. Like, just having something in the offhand will give him, in his mind, his 2-weapon fighting bonuses or something. Like, it would just be this just sinkhole of rules options all coming together that requires him to have a rake in one hand, and he won't tell me the end game until I've answered all of his yes or no questions about what, just so that he can then be like, well, then the rule has to work this way. And Corey is the reason I often do say we have fun in different ways and we have to acknowledge other people's play style. But if Corey says something like "I grab the rake," then I'm just like, all right, put on your GM armor, raise your shields, because he may be trying to ruin everything. Corey is the player that we don't let play Dominion anymore because his turns took an hour, because he would just play all the cards that gave him more actions with no end goal.
Okay, going to chat and doing a little bit of impromptu censorship. I apologize, Miss Shori, in advance. She says, absolutely, we call that the prop goblin. Anything that should be local but explicitly called out is handed to the PCs out of frame by a goblin with the necessary prop.
Okay, like hammer space.
Yes, hammer space is important. John Bastille also says that he has something like grab the rake. I imagine that that's something that more narrative improvisational GMs or GMs that prefer more games that have built-in player agency, such as like the Dresden Files or Fate, would be more comfortable with, because that is built into those systems at its core.
See, I'm going to draw a hard line between improvisational and player agency, because I am purely an improvisational GM, but player agency has always been like, that's not role playing, that's game playing / role playing. Like things with narrative control and player agency. Well, actually, no. I'm mixing up player agency and narrative control. No, player agency, I'm 100% for. I'm fine with that. I take back my objection.
Okay. All right. Next question.
All right. So this is you.
Aha.
It is category 2, so hidden genre preferences. Question 6, so 16.
Okay. Ryan, from Owen's questions, what is your favorite book series with 6 or more books in it?
Oh, I don't read a lot. Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy technically has 6 books, if we take the Salmon of Doubt into consideration. So I'll go with it. We're episode 142, so I'm going to say the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Is there a follow-up, or is it really just name the series?
That's it. Just name the series.
Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, also one of the only book series I've read.
I think the reason this is coming up is that if campaigns are like anything, they are like long book series, because they extend well beyond maybe where even you intended the story to go. Because if you look at if you go into any sci-fi fantasy genre series, there's a little pattern you'll notice if you read any of the long-lived series. And Jacob Blackman is stealing my answer, but where the first 2 or 3 books will be these really contained storylines. Like it's like, especially the first book is usually like super contained storylines where everything gets wrapped up almost entirely with a little bow on it, and then maybe the second one. And the reason they do this is they don't know if they're going to be picked up for book 4, 5, 6, 7. So why establish this long-running arc that you're not going to be able to finish? So you'll notice this with pretty much every series, where the first book is super contained, the second book might be super contained, and only the third or fourth book is they sort of go in and backwrite and hack in connections to the earlier stuff, and then it goes way off into this huge epic arc of storylines where all the books are connecting together. My favorite series, long-running series, is Jim Butcher's The Dresden Files. It's just a fantastic read, great for any role players to read it. I think that most people serious in the role-playing have at least heard of it. And it just is really good at connecting these long character arcs and doing deep dives into characters and putting situations that would be very good at inspiring role-playing. And there's a reason it has its own role-playing game. Heck, there's a role-playing game in the system, or in the storyline, that gets played in the background. So it's obvious there are connections there.
Miss Roy is asking if comics count, and if so, Sandman. So I've read a lot of comics, but there's only a couple of comics I would consider as series. Most of them, I would say, are serialized.
Mm-hmm.
One of them is Preacher, and that one definitely feels like it has an arc. And not even like you're talking about. It really feels like right from the get-go he wanted to get the main plot in motion, get the world established, get the main characters established, and then it's episodic in each volume, but it always, except for probably one volume, it always moves towards the end goal at the end of, I believe, the 9th volume. And then the other one is Animal Man, which, the Grant Morrison's revival of Ant-Man is just insanely well structured. It feels like it's just a superhero story, and then it starts feeling like superhero story with some surprising politics in it. But it also becomes this meta story, and there's time traveling elements, and it handles time traveling elements better than almost any fiction I have ever consumed. So TV, movie, name a time travel story, the way that it's handled in the Animal Man Grant Morrison run is perfect.
Awesome. I didn't think about comics because they're different. I usually think completely serialized, but I mean, there's the V for Vendettas. There's the Preacher. Preacher is magnificent. I love reading every inch of that. There's of course the Watchmen, which probably is the first one to establish this sort of writing. It's great, but no books.
For me, I don't read much. Remember when James Sutter was on last, and I told him I honestly am only reading Pathfinder Tales novels lately?
And you didn't answer Pathfinder Tales?
I don't consider that serious.
It is true. There's some series in it, and have any of them made it to 6?
How many Dave Gross novels are we up to?
5.
Then no, none of them made it to 6.
All right. Next question.
I believe it's my turn. While I'm rolling, Bard Wannabe is talking about Hickman's run on Fantastic Four. That's interesting. I was talking to somebody at the office about that just the other day because I asked if anyone actually could recommend a run on Fantastic Four, and that's the one that people were bringing up. All right, Category 2, question number 1. So we're still in the... nope, I'm on the wrong page. The hidden genre preferences. The first question. What is your favorite Saturday morning cartoon? What is your favorite animation you don't consider a Saturday morning cartoon?
Oh, goodness. Favorite Saturday morning cartoon is Gargoyles.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. For probably obvious reasons. It's just a really great storyline. It was a little bit more ambitious than your typical Disney cartoon by far. It dealt with a lot of more advanced issues that at the time weren't addressed, such as race and bigotry and those sorts of issues, as well as having cool castles and magic and flying dudes, which was fun. It did get a little bit silly, of course, because we're still talking 90s Saturday morning cartoons, and they don't do those anymore. There are no Saturday morning cartoons left in the world. That is a thing of the past. My favorite cartoon that I don't consider a Saturday morning cartoon? It's a difficult one to say. Habane Renmei. I might be cheating because I'm going for an anime. It's not even your typical anime. It is Charcoal Feather Federation. It is a really good soft piece short story arc. It's about 12 episodes long. About, well, it's really would be super spoilery to go into too much of it, but basically it's about a commune in a small village where people wake up hatching from eggs with angel wings and have to deal with really deep inset emotional issues. It's a really hard thing to say what it's about without watching it, but it's probably a great art piece. This isn't your actiony or sexy anime. This is like a really soft tone, drawn out, deep look at characterization in art.
Perram, I don't think it's any surprise that when I say my favorite Saturday morning cartoon was G.I. Joe.
This would be shocking if it was any other answer.
So, yeah, I love G.I. Joe because it's a gigantic cast of characters. Each one is well defined. Each one has a unique sound to their voice, a unique look. The plots were really influenced by which characters were in that episode, and even though there was like kind of the core cast of characters, it was still a core of like 20 characters, which like the entire X-Men cast of the 90s X-Men cartoon. Like, just the number of characters that they managed to balance, write consistently, make interesting, make fit in this idea of what G.I. Joe was, when you've got a crazy drunken sailor like Shipwreck, and you've got a guy with emotional issues like Lowlight. And like, there was just... Actually, there's a podcast I've been listening to lately called Knowing is Half the Podcast, and they've been watching each episode of G.I. Joe and then doing not doing live commentary, but just doing like comments on it after the fact. And they brought Buzz Dixon, who was the story editor, in as a guest when they were doing the first episode of Arise, Serpentor, Arise, and he gave amazing insight into Lowlight, who is the sniper. And there's this one episode where Dr. Mindbender finds a way to infiltrate the G.I. Joe's dreams, and the idea is he'll give them nightmares so that they're less battle-ready and they're more paranoid. And when we see the next day after he's turned on the machine, all the Joes are just like, man, I had the weirdest night. And then Lowlight comes in, who's usually just this miserable character, and he is in the best mood, and he just starts talking about how he never usually sleeps because he has these terrible nightmares, and somehow Mindbender's machine has given him control over his nightmares, and it's about his abusive relationship with his father, how his father used to drop him off at junkyards and tell him not to come home till he had 10 dead rats. This was in the cartoon. These are lines of dialogue from the cartoon. And he was saying that the reason that they made Lowlight kind of screwed up is that if you were a kid from a broken home and you were watching G.I. Joe, then the only characters you could relate to were the Dreadnoks, and they were bad guys, and they were kind of jokes anyway. Like, you wouldn't actually want to be Buzzer, but you could relate to Lowlight. You could see yourself in Lowlight, and that was just one of their goals, that for all of these 100 plus characters that they had in the 2 seasons that the show ran, they wanted to make sure that everyone could see the person they want to be in it. So yeah, that's why I like G.I. Joe, for the characterizations, and for just, it was smarter than a lot of people may give it credit for. A lot of people will remember G.I. Joe for the knowing is half the battle PSAs, and they were absurd, and yes, it did mean that Dial Tone was eavesdropping on your weird conversation in the garage about drugs. But no, like, when G.I. Joe got psychological or got like really character driven, man, it was really interesting. I mean, and my favorite animation that I don't consider a Saturday morning cartoon would be Sam Keith's The Max from MTV was doing a couple of animation things. They did the head and they did the Max, and it was when comic books were becoming gritty, and what a lot of people understood gritty to mean was just kill off characters, do terrible things to characters, and it was all these like very short-sighted storylines like The Death of Superman and Nightfall, where within a year it had been retconned. Whereas the Max, it was gritty, but it was super character-driven, and at the same time, super weird. But like, there was a consistency to the weirdness, and so you were just kind of trying to unlock what this world is actually about, what's actually happening in these plots, while also falling in love with the only four main characters in the story. And the voice acting was absolutely incredible. The animation was like, okay, so the artwork was great, but the animation was simple. It was very few frames per second, and sometimes it was just still images that the characters were talking over. But it's an artistic piece. It's fun for just wacky lines with great delivery. Like, they got squid. That's something I will always remember, and it has absolutely no meaning even in context. But that is a cartoon that I will always remember, and I don't have it on DVD. I have it on VHS. I need to get a DVD copy of that, which I know was eventually released, because that is a show that really changed how I view entertainment in the 90s.
We got some answers from chat. John Bastille is saying Wizards. I have never seen it, and I know I should. I know of it. I know what it is, but I've never watched this Wizards movie. F Tones is saying for non-Saturday Evangelion. Man, that's a good one, but it's one that messes you up when you watch it. Bennett, great. The 90s Batman's cartoon might be probably one of the best portrayals of the characters ever created. Missouri says best episode, the episode where Shipwreck is convinced that Cobra was defeated and he was married with a kid.
Yeah, there's no place like Springfield Parts 1 and 2.
There's a lot of gaslighting fans in chat today.
Couple of mentions of Scooby-Doo, which I I'm surprised by. Now, Ms. Rice specifically says Scooby-Doo Mystery Incorporated. Is that the one that had the really funky style? Like it's only about 5 years old or so.
I don't know anything. I'm sorry. I don't know my Scooby Doo's. I don't. I know that there was that one series that spun off of when they started doing the movies where the monsters weren't fake. Yeah, they did a
Yeah,
series of
that
those
bumped me
movies.
out. That's
I,
not what Scooby-Doo's supposed to be about.
right. I mean, it was a fun gimmick, but then it got weird. And I just haven't kept up with Scooby, so I'm sorry, Miss Roy. I
The one I'm
guess.
thinking of, it was like very. It was either thin lines or no outline. So all characters in animation have an outline, and Samurai Jack kind of created this no outline style that really just made it. It just kind of messed with your perspective, and it had a cool effect to watching it. And there was one Scooby Doo that was all pastel in its color palette and had no lines, so it stood out because Scooby Doo's had a fairly consistent animation style over the years. Like the framing has gone up, the colors have been modernized, but usually Scooby Doo just kind of fits in with whatever else is on. Whereas that particular Scooby Doo series that I just kind of came across on Teletoon one day, it stood out as this is a stylized TV show, and it was I got into it too late to actually follow the plot, but I was really I was really intrigued by the artwork.
Miss Roy says it's a very recent but and self-aware Scooby-Doo series. They meet up with Baba Yaga, a Hodak, and play D&D.
Mhm. Okay, so if that is the series I'm thinking about, that disappoints me because Scooby Doo, I like the skeptics angle that
Mm-hmm.
there's always a scientific, logical explanation for things.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, when it became just a Monster of the Week series, and a lot of them have been, that missed the point to me. And I'm not super committed to Scooby Doo, so it's not like I was offended that they changed it. It just that's not what I thought Scooby Doo was trying to say.
Next question.
All right, so just to let you know, Param, it's been an hour.
Mm-hmm.
And we do have 10 questions to preview. So how many more random rolls do you want to do?
Let's at least do one more.
Okay. Have we done anything from the 21 to 30 range, which is called players?
No.
Okay. So do you want to skip the D4 roll and just do a D10 and
Sure.
say we're in that category? All right. Question 5. I believe No, I'm asking you.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Or are you asking me?
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. I'll ask you.
Mhm.
If a player consistently and definitely has worse luck than any other player or the GM, and that makes the game less fun for them, should the GM or other players make any special rules to compensate for that player's unluck?
I don't believe in luck. I don't. I do not believe it is a true concept. Therefore, I do think that eventually this player's luck would eventually correct itself. Just loss of probability. If I have if I have any of my players consistently having a terrible time, and all the players agree that there's a source of problem for the terrible time, I don't care what sacred cows we have to sacrifice to fix that problem. If we're having a bad time, we're not doing what we're there to do, which is have a good time. So I would try to come up with the least offensive way to solve that problem, whether it be researching a character that doesn't really care that much about their die rolls. Like there's some character builds that it doesn't matter, don't roll a 5 or under and you're going to be effective as this build, or make me roll dice. You're a spellcaster. You're focusing on stuff that's DC, and I'm going to have to roll these dice. And Lord knows that my dice have pretty standard deviations, so that's not going to do it. That would be my first go-to. Otherwise, then I would just start throwing in, player agency rules. I have hero point systems. I would probably come up with a solution that was agreeable to the entire table. Now the kicker there, it has to be agreeable to the entire table. It's as much as I don't want any one person to not have fun. I have to ultimately make sure that my entire table is having fun. But usually we would come up with some sort of solution. But yeah, I would address that and I would come up with custom solutions to fix the problem. I wouldn't just say, well, them's the rules of the game, unless it was PFS.
This spurs a lot of memories in me, Perram.
Mm-hmm.
So the first one, so my earliest memory of this, and it wasn't necessarily luck as much as it was a new player who had chosen. Actually, it was Tina. She was playing a Battle Sorceress, which was a variant from Unearthed Arcana in her first role-playing, her first game, her first campaign with us, which was her first campaign ever. And this was when we were rotating GMs for that. And so she wasn't having a whole lot of luck in the battle side of the Sorcerer. And the Battle Sorcerer had a higher base attack bonus but fewer spells. It was a bit like the Magus without any of the spell combat.
Okay.
And she wasn't actually getting much of the combat out of it. So she had given up spellcasting for nothing, effectively. And so Mark, who was GMing, gave her a sword that he kind of described like a lightsaber, and it basically meant that her melee attacks were touch attacks. And it solved the problem. She felt more balanced. She felt more engaged in combat. Great. Until at one point, after Mark had left the campaign, and another player, picked up that sword when she was knocked unconscious, or she gave it to him because he had to run off and do something in solo, and it was just destroying the game because now we had a full base stack bonus warrior hitting things with a touch attack. And so since then, anytime a situation like this has come up, I've been terrified to find the simple, quick solution, and would rather just like, let's not deal with it this session, and then between sessions we will find an elegant, sophisticated solution, because of what that did to that campaign. Even if it was just one session before we all kind of sat down and said, no one else can use this sword. We have no in-story reason. We just have to accept as a group that no one else can use this sword. The other thing is that you've said that you don't believe in luck.
Do not.
You know where I'm going with this. Even last episode, when I brought up Jeff, you don't want him to touch your dice because somehow Jeff, even though luck doesn't exist, Jeff is an exception to that. And even you are terrified of Jeff's unlucky streak. Now, Jeff has actually corrected this himself by playing a lot of casters so that he chooses options that he never has to roll dice. It's always like, I have to roll saving throws against his effects, or he's just buffing us, or he's debuffing, whatever it is, he wants to roll dice minimally. Although in the last campaign when he was playing a wizard, it did trip him up because he eventually got fly, and after going to a convention, I was convinced that I'd been playing fly a little too loose, and I really should be calling for fly checks because it does affect things. And if a wizard doesn't have ranks in fly, but he's constantly flying, then it's unfair. He's getting skill points dedicated to other things that should be dedicated to fly, so he's at least somewhat competent in that skill. I was convinced that not putting ranks in fly made wizards a little bit unbalanced skill-wise. And I kind of sprang it on him, which, upon reflection, was unfair to me because he should have known that in the future he would eventually need to rebuild his character to have ranks in fly or whatever, but like it completely changed how he wanted to play that character. He didn't want to play a flying wizard anymore because he didn't want to have to roll for flying. To be honest, we just kind of make it an in-joke. We've all got our D20s with Jeff instead of the 1, and that worked for Jeff. I do not recommend that as the solution for all players. But you can either do something in world and justify it, you can do it at the table and justify it, or you can find some kind of rule solution. But it really does come down to the player. Because I know that there's at least one player that I've gamed with where, let's say, his character concept was just, he's the best warrior, he's just awesome, he kicks everybody's butt, and then if the first 2-3 sessions he's just got a bad string of luck and he's not hitting anybody, he won't adjust his character to be like, well, I thought I'd be great, but now I've got this depth. I am a failure at being great, which makes me just feel like an absolute failure, and making it a cool role-playing thing like some of my players might do. He would just be bummed and it just would disengage. And so somehow I would have to feed him a low AC monster just so that he can feel like he's actualizing his character concept, even though his concept was some things that are luck dependent and the luck wasn't under his control.
Now, Miss Roy has a counter to my answer
Mhm.
that says, if you're making rules to fix something bad luck, do you make rules to counterbalance somebody's good dice rolling mojo? And nope. Because
Nope.
the only person that gets cheated is the GM, and I'm going to lose anyway.
So, um, this has happened to me where, because we didn't do points by, we do rolling for stats. And in third edition, I was playing a Hexblade that just had ungodly stats. Like, I think my average stats was 16 or something. And the Hexblade is a debuffing warrior. He's basically, picture a fighter who had a witch's hex. Not too many of them, but still. That's the concept behind the Hexblade. And so I would show up, just embarrass all of the NPCs, and then just destroy them with my sword. And so I wasn't doing house rules, but I was just making other character choices to debuff the fact that I was an insanely good character. I will nerf a character when I feel like I'm getting too good. And I know not a lot of people will, but that is how I will always approach that.
Well, anytime I have a player that is outshining the rest of the party to the detriment of the rest of the party, I will usually start by pulling on the side saying, hey, you're doing awesome. Can you make sure that the other guys have a good time and share the spotlight? Maybe not one-shot the boss, even though you know you can. And I know you can. You're just playing at a level a little bit above what they're used to. I can usually get away with that because I almost always have like a new player at the table. And some of my players just like to do crazy things just to be crazy people. But then most of my players have been playing this system or some variation of it for 20 years now, and we know all the ways to break it.
All right, Perram. I have been enjoying the jumping around. So what I propose is that now we just take a couple of questions off of the new list, which is the category is the environment.
Okay.
And then once we've done a couple of questions there, which I think we should still roll the D10 for, then maybe we can start looking at rolling either completely randomly, just see how it goes.
All right. Let's do a random environment one.
All right. So our first question is question number 42.
Okay.
Excellent. I'm going to read this, even though it's your turn, just because it's 42. What's your favorite, interesting, furniture arrangement for RPG playing? Do you like a big table with dining chairs or prefer sofas and a coffee table? Does your preference vary based on the game system or type of encounter?
I get to cheat answering this one.
Well, you can cheat but brag. Just remind people how awesome your setup is.
My favorite environment to play the game is my game room. That is custom built to be one of the best game rooms I could build it. I have a nice big table with a battle top riser that we use during play. I've got a stone castle. I decorate the thing to the max so that every inch of aesthetic is there. My GM notebook is custom bound in leather and carved. All my players play with props that are custom made for them. I have they're even down to their character sheets are in these little plastic boxes with custom built character art that I spent hours making that they're given. We have every possible miniature you could think of. Well, not every possible, but we have a collection of thousands of miniatures so that I can, more times than not, put something dead accurate, if not the exact character on the board that they're seeing. So usually the answer to what does it look like is it looks like this. To the extent that I was even able to custom code the fur of a bugbear without planning ahead because I needed one that looked spooky and ghosty, and I happen to have a ghost face killer bugbear. So I go out of my way to make a completely immersive gaming room experience because I think that it makes it so much easier to get into the game that way. And we have Faint Spectre saying, can we see it? You absolutely can! I will post a link in chat shortly while Ryan's answering, but we've got it up on the blog.
Yeah, I was actually just trying to find that link, but if it's my turn, then you can find the link. So first I'm going to give a bit more of an abstract answer than I think this question was intending, but my preference is at home because whenever I'm playing at a game store or sometimes we were playing at the office for the Blind Ferret group, I'm just never as comfortable as I am when I know I've got the full range of hardcovers, when I know where my miniatures are, I know where my face cards are, I know that if there's something that I didn't plan to need, or if I'm playing and the GM needs something, I know where that something is, and I can get it really quickly. And like when we were buying a house, one of the things we were considering when we were looking at rooms, specifically basements, was where will the gaming stuff go and how would I lay it out? And like we've talked about how I can be super lawful in some things and super chaotic in other things, but I'm very rarely neutral. This is one of the things that I'm super lawful in. I am super structured when it comes to how my gaming environment would work. So if we're talking about specific, I do prefer a square table, even though I feel like I should prefer a round table. Actually, I prefer a rectangular table, and it doesn't usually work out this way, but I prefer to GM from the middle of a long side, and I'm okay having two players on the same side as me with my GM screen kind of blocking their view, because I feel like if you are in the middle of a long side of a rectangular table, then you are as close to every player as you can be. Like the distance between you and the furthest player is not that much farther from the distance between you and the closest player.
I might have to change my arrangement, because that sounds like a good thing.
Yeah, because a circular table, you will be very far from the person directly across from you. And I can project, but sometimes there's just... Like, I can project, but I can't guarantee the person farthest from me can project back. The advantage of a round table, and why I was saying I thought I would like it more, is that I like moving when I'm GMing. I like running around the table. And so in a convention situation, I am constantly trying to get as close to the player whose turn it is, and then I will move back to my spot when it's my turn to roll the dice or reference the rules. But in a home environment, definitely a fairly large rectangular table. Let's see now. Chairs. Prefer soft chairs or sofa? I hate the sofa just because I find that if a player is in a sofa, then they'll ask other people to move the mini for them because they don't want to not recline. What's the opposite of recline? Decline? They don't want to lean forward. They're too comfortable, and it disengages them from the table. They don't need to be in uncomfortable chairs. I like comfortable chairs. An ideal situation would be everyone has a chair with either a dining, a TV tray next to them, or some kind of built-in, just small thing for storing books or whatever, just to have, like, the table is everyone's space, and this is your space for whatever you need it for. Deck of cards, miniatures, snacks. You have your private table, and we have the more public shared table.
I definitely agree with you about the couch situation. I've been toying with doing like the couch setup for the game room and getting like a living room height game table custom built. But I find that if they're leaning back, they're disengaged. Period. Not even the wanting the people to move or getting comfortable. Leaning forward means I have their attention, and especially if they are leaning forward on edge of seats, and if I'm leaning forward and active. If I'm leaning back and kind of relaxed, man, it's real easy to get comfortable, and it's real easy to doze off. And when it's not your turn, and it's like a half-hour combat, and you know that you just had to double move, you didn't even get to do anything, and your phone's right there, man, I would lose players like that so easy.
Yeah, I know as a player I will deliberately disengage when it's not my turn, because that's meta knowledge. If I'm not, like, okay, if everyone's in the same room, fine, but if somebody's doing a solo scene, I don't want to know. I want them to have to explain it to me after the fact in character. And that actually has been valuable, because sometimes the GM will then notice, oh, this player interpreted something wrong. His character would not be summarizing those events the way that player just did. And it also just, we get to then deliver that information based on the relationship our two players have, instead of me just hearing it as some kind of omnipotent third party viewing the situation that my character has no access to. Are we going to let's go for another environment one. This is an interesting category. That's cocked. A 3. Do you want to read it?
I didn't have it up.
All right, I've got it. Do you roll your dice in a dice tray? Do you use a dice tower? Do you need a lot of space for your dice? If playing a diceless game or one with cards, do those need special space?
I am starting to lean towards doing dice trays because I'm kind of clumsy, and some of my players are clumsy. And sometimes I don't get to play in my game room, and I have to play, PFSs at the game store. Or even in my game room, man, when all of us are piled in there, I mean, it's big, but it ain't infinite, and we're some big fellas. Just being honest about it. So I don't like chasing dice under the table. That just instantly kills the flow of the game. Nobody wants to leave the dice under the table. Nobody's real comfortable saying, "Yeah, we'll get it after the game." So that means that suddenly we have to disengage from the game to go hunt the dice. So actually, one of my projects that I was planning on doing this weekend is going and making some dice trays.
Oh, cool.
Yep, I don't know how I'm going to plan it out because I kind of haven't had time. It's been a bit of a crazy week, but I intend to get this done to get nice small dice trays for everybody. My brother, he uses a cup. My parents have gotten into doing pottery, and so they kind of made this little short cup that probably wasn't intended. Like this was a learning experience piece of pottery, not a polished piece of pottery. So, but it's like this little cup, like this big and like kind of round. So he's using it as his dice cup, and it has this really cool sound because it's it's porcelain. So ding 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 every time he rolls dice, so we all hear it. So maybe dice cups are the answer.
That was actually Bastile's answer. He uses a Yahtzee cup.
Oh, but he rolls onto the table. I want to roll into the container, and the Yahtzee cup would be
then
too
I was
tall.
picturing it like Yahtzee.
No, he has this little cup that's kind of short. It's kind of like really stout and short, and he just rolls into it, ding, 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 and then looks into it and tells me the dice roll. This is a key. I play with people I trust, and people who cheat don't get to play with me.
Fair. Well, if people did want to go the direction of the Yahtzee cup, Yahtzee over the last couple of years has done a lot of collector's versions. So the Zelda Yahtzee cup is just a treasure chest, and that would be awesome. The Hobbit one is a gold cauldron. So I think there's a Pirates of the Caribbean also has a cauldron-like one. There's a Cthulhu Yahtzee. So that leaves an impression at the game table. There's a Walking Dead zombie one. There's the Jaws shark one.
Well, with Starfinder coming up, there's the Firefly one. That's just the Firefly
that one's
ship.
gorgeous.
And then there's the Claptrap one for Borderlands fan. Also would be good for sci-fi. Yeah, good stuff. What about you, Ryan?
So I am very particular with my dice. When I sit down at the table, I lay them out in rows. So I've got my D20s from darkest to lightest. And when I roll a whole bunch of D20s together, darkest is the highest bonus, the lightest is the lowest bonus. And I just know this. And then I do the same thing with all of my other ones. My D6s tend to be almost like a little house. I'll have my dark purple ones together, and then my white one with purple highlights will just kind of sit on top. I will keep my D12s away from my D20s so that I don't mix them up, grab the wrong one accidentally. And so I don't need a dice tray to contain my rolls. I have absolute power over my dice, Perram. I am so needy when it comes to how my dice are handled and rolled and whatever. I'll lend them out and I'll let you roll my dice however you are comfortable with, but dice I almost have an empathic link with. So I don't need a dice tray. A dice tower, anytime I've seen someone use a dice tower, it tends to be novel for the first couple of rolls, and then nobody wants to use the dice tower anymore. There was that Kickstarter for the Siege dice towers. Those seemed really cool, and I almost wanted to get in on them, even though they were like $60 each. Do you remember them, Perram? There was the catapult that you can... catapult, trebuchet, and then just the giant hammer that you dump a whole bunch of dice down on.
Yeah, they were fun looking.
Or as a shelf piece that I would use maybe in like a boss fight if a crit is rolled and there's some kind of siege theme going on.
I don't like dice towers. I hate to say it. It seems like it adds time to the dice roll. It makes a lot of distraction. They're always on the table. They're always in the way, and they're tall, so you can't just set things on them or shove them underneath my. Like, for those of you who don't know what a battle top is, it's basically a little table that sits on your table that I put the battle mats on. It's like just a few inches, so that way the books and papers can go under it, and they don't disturb the game mat, and the game mat doesn't have stuff stacked on it when we're playing. It's super great. You can improvise this yourself easily, but the product itself is from Crystal Cast, and I like it a lot. And it's a bit pricey, but it's fun. I'm thinking about making
my
my
dad
own.
made one out of old wood from a bed that was broken.
Do you remember when I custom made that folding RPG table?
Yeah, I loved it.
I'm thinking about putting short legs on it and making it a custom, like, wood battle top.
Your table's big enough for it?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. It would be a little bit bigger than the battle top, of course, but then I could put like really big game mats out. It's 4 foot by 4 foot, so nice.
Going back to question 42, I kind of want to gift wrap my table with gaming paper, and then we use the tabletop or the battle mat or the battle stand, however you want to call it, and we use our standard size maps. But then when things just get huge, I'd like the idea of taking off the battle board, and then just the game is that much bigger. I tell everyone to clear the table, take as little space as you can because this is going to be a big game. And I did that one time, but it was just for a single encounter that I knew was going to be huge. I would like to also do that as a permanent thing.
Okay, well, I have a suggestion for that. If you want to do it permanent, or do you ever want to use this table for anything else?
I only use it for gaming.
Okay, so the gaming paper idea is cool, but that's going to tear real easy, and it's not the best.
I would need to finish it.
Yeah, it's not the best fidelity print either. But what is easy to do that I've done before is get a good color paint that you like, or a brown, or whatever you like. I went with a light marble, light marbleized paint. Paint the top of that table that color, and then just using a ruler and we'll do it in pencil first, and then do it in Sharpie, and then put another gloss coat on it. Put your own grid there that's built into the table. If you put a varnish coat on it after you're done with that, it will be permanent, look a lot better, and it won't break or tear or anything. If you do it in pencil before you put down the marks, then you won't have to worry about slippages or anything. And if you're doing it with a string or a ruler, this is pretty easy to do.
Perram, let me tell you a story about a third grade math class that stuck with me. We were learning rulers. I did the geometry assignment, brought it up to my teacher, and he called me a liar because he did not believe that I could possibly make such crooked lines using a ruler. I am terrible at drawing straight lines. No tool has ever helped me. I've gotten better than I was in third grade, but that is not a skill I have.
Is this a skill Tina has?
Yes, absolutely.
We're talking like 10 minutes worth of work to put the lines down.
I'm sure if I asked Tina to do that, then she would find ways to improve it. She would maybe use glow-in-the-dark paint on top of it just in case we ever wanted that. She would turn this from a 10-minute project into probably a whole day. It would basically be
awesome result at the end.
In the morning, and I'm like, Tina, I got to go to bed. And she's like, I'll be up for another couple of hours finishing this.
Do we have any questions from chat? We have one. Faint Spectre. I don't think it's from the list, but he says, I'm curious, what do you guys do in terms of food? I tend to play with my friends from late afternoon to nighttime. We tend to order pizza about halfway through the session, but it definitely breaks things up before and afterwards. Well, I have two answers to this. For our PFS night, we incentivize attendance by providing pizza before the game starts. So we play starting at 1 in the afternoon. At 12 o'clock, all the organizers are there with the pizza. And it gets everybody's stomachs full. They're not distracted by hunger or incoming delivery. And because we live in a low-income area, so a lot of the kids that we get aren't always the kind of people who can really afford things like this all the time. So it also kind of doesn't... I don't have a person who can't afford lunch forced to sit there and watch somebody eat who can. Now, we will never say that. That's the reason we do it, but in community events in this area, free food is often provided for similar reasons. As far as and I want to call out Chris Hall and Jeff Ellswick, who started that tradition. This was not initiated by me, but they were the ones that really helped revive PFS in this area. I've only recently stepped back into the organizer spot to keep it going. But for the game nights, when I'm playing with my friends, everybody brings food and everybody shares it, and they bring it with them. And usually it's snacks, but sometimes it's dinner or something like that. And I don't buy anything because the GM doesn't. This is a thing that they have instituted, not at my insistence. But it is a little bit good to be appreciated. The justification is I'm providing everything else. But I would happily throw in, and I do sneak in like pops and stuff into the piles when I play. But we have tried the middle of the game delivery stuff, and it just means that you basically lose a half hour of play right there, because the food comes and then everybody wants to eat the food. Nobody wants to get the grease from the food onto things. And if I'm playing a super long session, if I'm playing like 6 hours plus, then that's a welcome distraction. But if I'm playing like I usually do 4-hour games, that's not a very welcome distraction.
So with my group, we start around 7 o'clock on Monday, and most of us work until 5:30, and then there's traffic. So people kind of arrive at 6 hungry. So everyone shows up with their own supper. We get it away early. We get the pre-game socializing out of the way. We catch up. We get the technical stuff done because Matt remote plays. He Skypes in, or he Google Hangouts in, I guess. And then after that, when we're doing my home group, and this is my preference, there's no communal snacks. Everyone has their own snack. Why it's my preference is, one, you buy to your tastes, because anytime if I'm getting soft drinks, it's either a Dr. Pepper or a Fresca, which I know are kind of the out there snacks, or the out there beverages. And same thing, my tastes are just a little bit off. If I'm ordering pizza, I'm getting the Hawaiian. And so I'd rather get the thing that I prefer and not have to worry about doing the lowest common denominator snacks. But not only do you get the taste you want, you get the portions that you are comfortable with. Like whenever I've played a game with communal snacks and everyone just brings a couple of giant bags of chips, I find I eat more than I'm happy with. And then like when there's just the dregs, everyone's just kind of finishing them off, and there's a sluggishness that happens towards the end of a session that doesn't happen when it's a more controlled snacking situation.
I'm spoiled. My players are ambitious with the food choices, so there are the chips and the drinks and stuff. The drinks are usually like artisan drinks, so it's not your typical Coke and stuff. These like your Joneses, your local taps, your things like that. It's on. We keep they bought me a little mini fridge for the game room, so we keep all that stuff in there. I have a really awesome group of players, but one of my players is a baker, and so he brings like custom baked stuff that tastes delicious in huge quantities. And he also theme bakes for the game. Like when we were playing Wrath of the Righteous, for the opening day ceremony, he conspired with me, and he had the city map printed onto a sheet cake that he brought to the game. So we started the game by cutting up the city, which is especially appropriate because that city gets destroyed in the opening act.
Yeah, it's so Corey's wife, Millie, and I named Millie Narstead after Corey's wife. She didn't take Corey's last name, but if she did, his last name is Narstead. So she is Millie Narstead. That's canon. She recently joined the group, and she is both playing a baker and is a baker herself. Not professionally, but she has been providing our group with baked goods periodically, even before she started gaming with us, and pretty consistently in the month or two that she's been playing with us. So that's my addendum to the communal snack thing. I am perfectly happy eating Millie's snacks. I think it's communal chips is the one that I balk at. I
You just don't want the pile of Doritos next to the bottles of Mountain Dew.
Yeah.
I
But
like
I'm
the
also
Doritos.
spoiled because, like I said, I most prefer playing in my home game or in my home, and so if I have a craving, I can just run to the other room and grab some peanuts or whatever. Like I have a constant flow of snacks, whereas everyone else kind of has to bring the snacks they expect to be eating for the rest of the day, or I have to be providing snacks for everybody, which then makes it not so much communal snacks as my snacks for all, which I'm okay with up to a point.
Mhm.
Once it starts getting expensive, then we would have to start talking about snack budgets for the group.
All right. Another question.
Bastille has a long comment. He used to play till 6 p.m. in Minneapolis at a high-rise party room.
Ooh,
But then the 35 West Bridge collapsed on game night.
Oh, well.
Yeah. Anyway, we'd all bring food to the party room and eat before playing.
Yep.
Well, that was an exciting story.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
That's not what I was expecting.
And I'm not sure how that ties in, but yes, avoid collapsing bridges on game night, please.
All right, Perram, do I roll another D10 for this section?
Yeah, one more off this section,
All
then
right.
we'll go do another.
I'll stick with the D10, just re-rolls 2s and 3s.
Okay.
We got a 5.
5. Let me pull it up here.
Yep.
Awesome. Okay. Question 5, Ryan. Have you
Yes.
ever used mood lighting in an RPG session? Did you enjoy it? What kind of mood lighting do you think might enhance a horror-themed RPG encounter? Exploration-themed? Combat? Diplomacy?
I have not. I like a brightly lit room at all times. If I did use mood lighting, it would be just for the box text to start the adventure, and then as quickly as I could, I would raise the lights again. I do remember one time being at my friend's basement, and he happened to have this is when we were kids and we were playing toys. He happened to have a red light bulb, and so we swapped it out. And I think that if you were playing like a survival horror or an aliens type scenario, that would be really cool. But I also don't know if there's long-term effects to your eyes for being in a room lit only in red for 4 hours. I mean, that's why you couldn't play the Virtual Boy for more than 15 minutes.
There's a lot of reasons you could only play the Virtual Boy for 15 minutes. I would want... I don't use mood lighting. I have tried it in the past, just for different effects, but I haven't really. But lately, that's been something I'm considering more and more. I want to kind of, at the very least, I want to put a dimmer switch on my game room instead of the static switch. Right now, I'm only improvising that effect by manually unscrewing some of the light bulbs. Because it's just too bright in there. It's great for reading and everything, but I'm going for a mood already, and it's the one thing I'm not doing. So I'm going to solve that problem. Beyond that, I think for a horror game, you obviously want to go with off-kilter lighting. Man, if you could get an LED backlight bar, these things can be gotten pretty cheap anymore, and you can even get computer-controlled ones that are easy to do for about $100-ish. Then you could get any custom mood light you wanted in your game room. Just run the bar behind you up the wall, and then your whole back wall could change to whatever color you needed. And especially if you tied it in with dimmed lights, you could get the whole LED set. There's several of those available for computer. You can control it with a smartphone, and you just go. Vroom. So diplomacy, I don't think has a light skit. I'm sorry, I don't think diplomacy does. As for the rest of them, I'd just lower the lighting and go with for horror, I would go with the reds or the greens. For combat, I would want dynamic lighting. I would want it to like sort of flash periodically. Other than that, don't know. I mean, I'd have to go fancy to make that work.
Well, you do remember the amber dice, something of the amber dice.
Oh yeah,
What was
they're great. They use tea light candles and 50 real candles for their lighting.
You know what? It looked super impressive, though.
It totally does. I've got an actual oil lamp in there. It's just for show, but it's actually a working lamp. I don't know why I don't just use it. I can get
The
a few
order
of
of the amber die, by the way. I was having trouble remembering what the noun of the amber die was. Bard Wannabe says, go to Red Alert. Are you sure, sir? It does require changing the light bulb from Red Dwarf. Good stuff. Yeah, I suspect that my like of a brightly lit room is combined with my clumsiness and my strength beyond my own control. So if I don't have the exact parameters of everything within arm's reach defined for me, then I will bump into it and possibly destroy it.
Okay. Next question from any section. I'm rolling.
Any section?
I'm rolling.
All right. You're gonna roll? Okay.
I'm rolling.
Have you got a D5 now?
I'm doing math by dividing a D20.
Okay.
Okay. Question 9 from grouping 1.
All right. GMing.
How much of the success of an RPG session, Ryan, is determined by the quality and actions of the GM? Would you prefer an awesome RPG rule set with an awesome adventure and awesome other players run by a mediocre GM, or a mediocre RPG rule set with a mediocre adventure and mediocre other players with an awesome GM?
Awesome GM. Awesome GM trumps the players. Awesome GM trumps the RPG. Mm-hmm. So my order would be awesome GM, then awesome players, then an awesome RPG system. Because an awesome GM could honestly just improvise an RPG system. It would be simple. It would just like combat resolution would be whatever. But yeah, my first RPG experience was on a whale watching trip in high school, and we had no dice. We had no rules. It was just that the GM was being particularly immersive, and I was just completely starstruck with the whole concept of RPGs. That, from very early on, I learned that a good GM is the most important thing. I mean, we've been playing this game,
guys. Time out. We have an interruption from Twitch that I'll have to edit out, so let's give a moment of silence after this. I'm really sorry, chat.
But they can hear us?
Shh, I need the blank bar. Okay. So what happened is Twitch kicked us off, and when we reconnected, it auto-played an ad with sound, which is against the rules, but evidently they went for it anyway. And that meant that ad with sound played while we were doing this. Sorry, guys. No, we do not have Epic Dubstep as our soundtrack, Yasumoto. I wish we did. I think you're absolutely right, though, Ryan. An awesome GM makes or breaks a game. Every time I think about really great con games I've gone to, or really great experiences I've had, I always remember the ones with amazing GMs, and those are the games that inspire me to up my game. Every time I meet an awesome GM, I steal something from them, because that is. I don't mean I take something from their dice bag. If they did a cool technique, then I did it.
Add it to your shelf.
Right. I mean, the first GM I saw that stood up the whole game, I was like, "Ooh, I need to learn to do this." The first GM that started like getting really enthusiastic with the character voices, I'm like, "Ooh, I need to do that." Somebody who was like really quick with the improvisation and moving the game along, like very quickly snapping their fingers and pointing to other players and calling out what they were doing, and so that nobody was quiet in the corner. I picked that up. And so awesome GMs not only make awesome games, but they breed awesome games in others.
And I also have proof that you can't just have awesome players and they'll make up for mediocre GM. Because at PaizoCon this year, I played with the same, well, at least a chunk of the people I was playing with at a certain table were the same people I play with every PaizoCon, the people I look forward to playing with every PaizoCon. I know they're great players, they're great guys. I really enjoy that game. I look forward to that game every year at PaizoCon. And we had a subpar GM. And the three of us were just sitting there frustrated because we knew with just a better GM, we could all be bringing life to everything. But the GM ultimately is controlling so much that there's only so much awesome a player can bring to a mediocre table by a mediocre GM.
Yasamutsu says, huge thumbs up on GM being key. They're the moderator, storyteller, and connection between the players and story. Everybody else is saying that the random dubstep interruption was the soundtrack to the awesome GMs. I'll go with that.
I like the onomatopoeias we've got going on, people explaining what the dubstep sounded like to them, which are very different from person to person.
All right, next question.
All right, you've got your crazy math going on, so do you want to be in charge of the dice rolling from now on?
Yes, I will roll.
All right, and I will read the next one.
All right, this one is question from category 1. Question 1. I think we already did this one, though, didn't we?
We talked about this last episode when we were giving a shout out to this
next
list.
one. Okay. Question from group... Oh, this will be from the new set.
Okay. Group 5.
Number 7.
Number 7. That's a new question. Have you played an RPG session enhanced with soundboards or sound effects? Did you enjoy it? What do you think might make sound effects better for an RPG session? What would make them less fun?
Ben, are you in chat right now? Did you bribe Owen for this one? Okay. We're talking about Ben from Sirenscape. Absolutely, I have. We've talked about this, for 4 different episodes? It's awesome. I've done it with the old-fashioned way, with the soundtracks and the CDs and all that jazz, and of course I do it with Sirenscape because Sirenscape is awesome. They do not sponsor us in any way. I just really love their software. I got a little Bluetooth speaker I put underneath the table. I have a little phone, and I need a better little phone because I'm always running out of juice when I'm trying to do my soundtracks. But yeah, I totally do it. It makes things so much better. My recommendation is to plan ahead a little bit. Don't try to improvise something you thought about 5 minutes before the game starts. Do a little bit of planning in advance, but otherwise it's so great. If you can bring music, it helps with those awkward silences. It helps keep everybody in the mood. It helps everything going. Just get some practice with it and do it. 100% do it.
Yeah, Sirenscape in particular is great because let's say you're playing something and there's just that one sound effect that keeps looping in. Or it's not on a loop, it's dynamically generated. But anyway, just that one sound effect that's like kind of ruining the immersion. You have ultimate control. You just have to figure out what that sound is and mute its track. Now, so that's for background sound, and that's what Sirenscape excels at. The question does talk a lot about sound effects, though. I'm thinking like special effects, which is something Sirenscape is also capable of, because every sound set has the series of buttons you can press. There's like a button for each energy type of spell. There's just the attack and damage rolls. There's the Wilhelm scream if somebody dies. Do you make much use of those buttons?
When I can, and I think they're appropriate. The spell effects and stuff, I think the quality needs to go up. I'm sorry, Ben. I just think we need some better spell effects. The fire ones are good, but the others are a little bit too sharp into things. But the roars and the footsteps and the creaking doors and the slams and the axe swings and stuff like that, I absolutely use.
I use them on occasion. I have found every now and then there's a delay that spoils the moment because I'll kind of build up to it and be like, and you hear? And I click it, and then everyone's expecting it about a second earlier than it does, and this just kind of... It makes a grand moment a slightly awkward grand moment.
I have noticed the same thing, and my technique I changed is that I don't say "and you hear." I'll pause in my speech. I'll give what I call a Paul Harvey pause. I put those in. Do you know about how Paul Harvey pauses?
Paul Harvey, no.
Okay,
I'm not
there's
even sure
this
who that
radio
is.
personality in the States called Paul Harvey. He used to do these real, like, schmaltzy, long stories of, like, various people and local heroes, and he's fairly popular. But he had a particular way he talked, and it was like he would put in pauses in his words for dramatic effect, but the secret was they were never for dramatic effect, because all of his speeches were off the top of his head, off of notes, and he would often have a hard time coming up with it. So Angier says the rest of the story. Yeah, that's the dude. The rest of the story. His pauses were intentional. He would draw out a syllable dramatically at the right points, which would give him that few seconds of brain time to think of the next one. So when I need to do a sound effect, I'll put in a Paul Harvey pause and press the button, and then wait till the sound cues. Let the sound play, and then backwards describe what they heard. So I'll play the roar, and then the roar will go off, and then like I'll go as you sit in for the campfire. Button press. Roar! A huge roar sounds over the mountains, causing the snowflakes to fall off the pines above. and things like that, and that makes it seem more natural. And even though you do have the small pause, it's accentuating the sound effect, not causing it to fall off flat.
Yeah, I'll take the responsibility for that. I think that my timing with the sound effects could be better, and I will keep that in mind in the future. Angire in chat says that his players voted and music and sound effects were more important than minis and visual maps.
Awesome. And I see we've got some Paul Harvey fans. I don't know that I would go that far. I love visual maps and minis and visual props and effects, but I mean, now that I have sound, I can't give it up. It'd be like giving up the Game Master screen.
So Sirenscape I use on my laptop that it's not entirely reliable. So if I just don't feel like dealing with my laptop that day, then the sacrifice is we don't have any sound effects that night.
Well, I got an old iPad and a Nexus 7 here. I've been thinking about just setting them up as the permanent Sirenscape thing, and I have this. I have this thing for the audio listeners. I'm holding up a mounting bracket with a flexible arm and a iPad mount. I can mount this to the side of the table next to my GM screen and just have a tablet there for button pressing. I use it for my computer mostly. I set up like little tablets and screens for when I'm playing flight simulators, and I put like part of the UI on there. So like so part of my flight controls are over there, and I go boop 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 boop. And sometimes I used to use it during the podcast and would have our chat on it.
Why did you stop?
I have a new desk arrangement, so I had to take it down temporarily.
Yeah.
Big new monitors. I bought 3 more 27-inchers.
All right, next question, Perram.
Next question is from list number 2, question 8.
Hidden genre preferences. Question 8. What story, in brackets, book, TV, movie, or otherwise, did you love when you were younger but have since come to dislike? Why do you think your opinion changed?
The Never-Ending Story.
Okay.
It is not much of a story. It encourages really terrible life decisions in the youth, and I was too stupid and young to know the difference because I was 4. It was my favorite movie for a very, very long time. I go back and watch it and cringe, not just from the quality. I go back and cringe at the quality of things all the time. See Thundercats or He-Man. But just like the movie itself was just typical 80s nonsense. The Goonies ranks high up here too. Just about any movie I liked from the 80s because of the irresponsible, crazy bad messages that they give off. It's like, oh, bullies aren't just bullies. They will actually try to kill you, and then people will be fine with this. Never trust authority figures because authority figures are always out to get you. I mean, man, the 80s taught us some messed up lessons.
I don't think they were aiming to teach us lessons. I think they were just entertaining us.
Sure, but it's the responsibility of all cultures' fiction to train the next generation.
Oh, is it?
Yes, this is why the next generation is the ultimate story.
Very nice. I feel like I have a specific example of this that is just not coming to me. I know that this is probably going to cause some outrage, but I definitely enjoyed Ghostbusters more as a kid. Whereas now I just look at it and I'm just annoyed by a lot of the storytelling. Because, actually, no, that's not fair. I liked Ghostbusters, the animated series. I only saw the movie a couple of times as a kid. And so to me it was an ensemble, whereas the movie is Bill Murray and Friends. And that kind of threw me off. Shoot, I just had an example come to me, Perram, and I've lost it again. Oh, no, a lot of the Disney movies so the pre-90 ones, pre-Beauty and the Beast, I cannot get through them in one sitting. Like, either, like, the weird racism or just, like, unevenness. Like, Dumbo is atrocious. It's hard to watch that.
Song of the South was also bad. There's a few. Black Cauldron is underrated all the heck, and it's worth watching. Sword of the Stone still holds up as a fun, good quality movie with less bad elements in it than most.
I always felt bad for the squirrels in Sword of the Stone.
And there's a whole fandom about the squirrels.
I would believe it. They were very expressive squirrels.
Yes, yes. Also, can I do the reverse of this?
Sure.
RoboCop.
Oh, RoboCop's amazing.
RoboCop is amazing, but it was just a really cool action movie when I was little, and then growing up and becoming politically involved in the real world now, and I'm like, this was brilliant social commentary disguised as an action movie at some levels that I cannot even fathom. And I'm talking about the original RoboCop 1. This does not hold up in the sequels. Some of the TV show did focus on some of the elements, but
I enjoyed the RoboCop TV show.
Yeah, but
I think it was underrated.
Not the cartoon, which was
No.
fun in its own ways, but different. But the actual live-action TV show. But the original RoboCop movie is some of the best social commentary that has ever been created.
Yeah, agreed. That's so that and Die Hard are movies that I dismissed as a kid as just action movies, and really came to appreciate that these are smarter, more like there is a lot more depth to those movies than I ever gave them credit for.
And they spawned off things like Cyborg and other movies that just didn't like.
Yeah, they missed the point.
They missed the point, and it's why Alien was so great, and even Aliens for completely different reasons. But all the sci-fi movies that tried to copy it didn't get it. This is how you separate true art from just media.
Well, you know what? Back to the non-reverse version of the question. I'm finding it hard to watch a lot of the early superhero movies. So like Spawn, I thought was great as a kid.
Okay.
And just like watching, not Charlie Sheen, Martin Sheen, like just embarrass himself. Like he has so little interest in being in that movie, and just the whole thing. Once the novelty of a comic book character is moving around on the screen, and it's pretty close to how the story was in the comics, once that wears off, there's nothing to that movie. It's not engaging at all. And even like the early Spider-Mans and the first X-Men movie, these were movies that were like, they changed my life at the time, and I can barely watch them now.
Interesting. The first X-Men movie, as in like the made in 2000 X-Men movie?
1999, yeah.
Interesting, because
that was Mutant Making Magnet Machine.
Right. But that's where I sort of draw the cutoff of when they started doing superheroes right from that movie forward.
Right, and they've gotten so much righter that now that is even not looking like a great movie anymore.
I still have fun. I've still watched that movie about once a year, and I still appreciate it. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm a huge X-Men fan. Probably for a while, my X-Men fandom rivaled your G.I. Joe fandom, including probably the amount of collectibles. I have since fallen off because, in my opinion, the quality of the product has fallen off. The quality of product of everything Marvel has made has fallen off, and so I have gotten out of it. But I still love those movies and watch them pretty frequently. All right. Bennett's the only one to come up. Oh, wait, no. John Bastille says the 80s were awesome.
That's a good word to describe them.
And Bennett says Terminator and the sequel. Just those, though, not the others.
Yeah, that is a franchise that dropped really quickly and now just won't die.
Right, which it happens to all good franchises, it seems.
I did enjoy the Sarah Connor Chronicles. Although I think I only watched the first season. Like the second season started, and even though I had I was happy with the first season, it was like the second season started, and I just did not even glance at it. And then I don't think it lasted much longer.
Yeah, that era right there was an era when a whole lot of really ambitious and promising TV shows were coming up in the sci-fi genre and just getting immediately killed. Sarah Chronicles, the Dracula series, that was amazing. A lot of really. And that's the problem. Nobody remembers it. If you get the chance, Hulu that up. The very recent, I think it's like 2013 Dracula series. It was amazingly well done and worth watching. Jacob Blackman says that the second season was terrible of Sarah Connor. I have no idea. I didn't get to watch that one. New question.
Journeyman was around that time, and Journeyman I really enjoyed. but it was only like a half season, and they suspected they weren't coming back after the half season, and so they concluded the meta plot that was going on, and I think that may have hurt their chances of coming back for a second season or for the rest of the season, because yes, people were like, I love this show and I'm disappointed it's gone, but I'm also satisfied. This is good. This is a good chunk of television, beginning, middle, and end. I'm happy right now.
Next question.
Yes. You're the dice roller.
Okay, this is from list 3.
Okay, players.
Number 3.
Okay. If you like the idea of a campaign of evil characters, discuss reasons players in general might not enjoy such a game. If you dislike the idea, discuss reasons in general someone might find such a game fun. Do you want to just tackle both sides of that?
Yes. Okay.
All right.
Well, no, I'm going to pick the one that I have a stance on.
Okay.
I dislike evil campaigns.
All right, go on.
For more than a few reasons. One is that I can't... When I'm doing role-playing, we all put ourselves in the mindset of the characters that we're role-playing to some extent in order to play them correctly, if you're putting effort into doing the actual role-playing part. I get emotionally invested the longer I inhabit a headspace, especially if it's a recurring headspace. And having to put myself into the kind of headspace needed to run that sort of campaign that often would be detrimental to my continued happiness playing these games. Beyond that, I find that any time I've ever tried to run or participate in any of these, they do not last. They do not last for the reasons that we have talked about on this show up to a million times. When players start working against each other, when players start encapsulating chaos and ignoring goals, then there's no structure to keep a game running around. You have a couple of fun sessions, and then the whole thing will putter out. How this could be done well would be to make sure that while everyone is evil, they are on the same page. If you're playing evil and you are playing Cobra, you're playing Cobra trying to do something awesome and working and being effective at it. And so that you have an adversary, or at least a adversity of some that requires you to work together, and you have goals and celebrate your successes. Just because you're evil does not mean that you want to lose this thing. And that's how you make it work right. And then it becomes a pretty standard campaign beyond that point, other than the motivations. I still probably wouldn't enjoy it, but at least that way it would last more than session 3.
Yeah, I think the concept is that an evil campaign is a little more liberating, because you don't have to abide by the social structures of the campaign. You don't have to abide by the authority figures of the campaign. But once you get into the face of the authority figures, like, they're authority figures for a reason. They either outrank you and outclass you, or they provide an essential service to the running of the community. And we don't know how to run a community. We as the GMs, we as the players, we don't know how to run into these chaotic or lawless or overthrown communities in the same way that we naturally know how to run a good campaign. And so, in my experience playing in an evil campaign, which wasn't that long, we tried to do Skull and Shackles with evil characters. It was novel, and then it wasn't.
So eventually it just became a campaign?
No, well, okay, so that is one thing that can happen. So there is a comic I'm thinking of called Demented Scorpion Child. It's probably you haven't heard of it, and I don't want to sound like a hipster, but it's fairly obscure, and it is about villains, and it's about a cross between the Joker and Ronald McDonald, and it starts, he's killed Superman, and then we kind of follow his adventures with his crew. And by the end of it, they just become the new heroes. And that's often how story about evil goes. Either that, or you do something like The Sopranos, where, yeah, they're kind of working together, but they also are regularly killing each other, and like that is not a sustainable RPG campaign. So those are basically the two options. You're either evil flavored good, or you're evil, and it just doesn't have the sustainability of good.
I mean, there's examples of this being pulled off right. It's just so much harder. It's just so much harder to keep it going, and not dilute it. I mean, we mentioned The Sopranos. The Sopranos changed television and television storytelling to the point that it's being copied over and over again with people not getting it, why it was special. But the reason it worked is that they were willing to play the long con with a large cast.
Yeah.
And that's what it's got to be. It's got to be special. If you're going to do the evil thing, you can't just kill off the character right away. That's not good for dramatic intent. You work and scheme and twist, and then so that when you're 16th level out of 20, you finally get rid of them. It's such a huge dramatic moment that it happened, and you can express it. In Uncle Figgy's Guide to GMing, if anybody remembers this, it's a great old advice for GMing. They talk about the scenario where it's a completely different, but related. Where a scenario where what does a GM do with a guy who has, as part of his character, that he has a really nice car that he loves. If the GM just early on hits that car with a meteor and destroys it, you get a couple of moments of using that prop. But if you extend your use of it over the course of the campaigns, oh man, you had to make a driving check, oh man, that paint scratched, that's going to be hard, oh, that's a dent you're going to have to buff out, and you can keep milking that for a long time without just getting rid of it. You have to respect your set pieces and use them responsibly. So yeah, character deaths in storytelling of anything can be effective. Sometimes randomly is good, sometimes not, but never just pointlessly.
I like that analogy a lot. And speaking of set dressings, do you want to go back to our preview of the environment list?
Yes, let's do question 5.
4 or 5. There's actually 6 left, so do you want me to do the 5th question of the 6 that are unanswered?
Yes.
All right, so that's question 49. Do you mind when people not playing the game watch an RPG session? If you don't mind, what might make you prefer to not have... Sorry. If you don't mind, what might make you prefer to not have a guest? Okay. If you do mind, what could a guest do to alleviate your concerns?
I have a qualified answer for this. If I'm playing in a public setting, I expect that to be part of the game, as long as they're not disruptive. We're already in a public setting. People are already playing with people they don't necessarily know as well. We're not likely going to be tackling some deep issues or very in-depth RPG in a game store on a public day. And so I'm fine with it, especially since it helps proselytize the game. When I'm playing at home with my home group that plays all together, I do not want people being self-conscious or self-aware, so I forbid it entirely. If you're a guest with a guest, you're welcome to sit in the house and watch TV and play video games. I'm sorry that you're in this thing. You can come check on this from time to time, but I do not perform in front of an audience when I'm in that setting.
So in my home game, we constantly have 2 guests, and they are extremely disruptive. So Scarlett will come down at least a couple of times in the first couple of hours, and she wants my attention. She will get my attention. She will roll the dice. There's no doubt about it. She is distracting from the game. We can muscle through it a little bit, but we're also like Scarlett's family to my players. We've all known each other for years or decades, and so they're completely okay with that. And then the other guest is Tina, who will be there entertaining Scarlett sometimes, and it can be a distraction, but it's a distraction we're okay with. And then after Scarlett's gone to bed, sometimes Tina will come down, just kind of catch up with what's going on in the campaign, watch for a little bit. And people, we're as comfortable playing around Tina as we are if she was still at the table. So it's not an issue at all. And she knows how to, ask for the updates from the person that's not involved and in a way that doesn't distract the whole table. Otherwise, there have been a couple of times when I've had a friend in town and they want to hang out and they don't want to necessarily play in the session, but they just kind of want to be there. That's a bit of an awkward situation, not only from the point of view from the players who are at the table and might feel self-conscious, but watching an RPG, you will have questions, you will be confused, you may want to run commentary that if you were a player at the table you would not be doing. And my instinct was to try and entertain, in this case it was Leia, she was in from Japan, so entertain Leia while also staying at the table because she didn't want me to cancel my game session. That was a situation that I don't think worked out ideally for anybody, but it wasn't so bad that I'd rather not see Leia on one of her few trips or one of her few visits from Japan. It was just like, tonight's going to be a little bit more awkward, but it's for the best.
Question 2 of the What's Left.
Question 2 of What's Left. So that's actually question 44. Do you enjoy using a playmat and miniatures for your RPG session? Does it depend on the game system? Do you use them only during fights? Or in any type of encounter? Do you like 3D terrain? Do you have a preference between printed maps and blank maps the GM can draw? So yeah, I guess now's a good time to remind people these are questions for RPGs, not just for Pathfinder players. Because I think you ask any Pathfinder player and they will say that. At the very least, yes, they use a playmat and miniatures or some kind of digital equivalent.
I like physical miniatures on a physical playmat. I like 3D terrain and all the props that can bring it. I mean, at this point, like, you know, I'm spinning up my 3D printer. I'm building cardstock terrain. I'm got some Dwarven Forge that I picked up for a stupidly cheap price,
Nice.
And you know, anything I can do to up the immersion of the game, I'm going to take it.
So right now, like I said, Matt Skypes into our home group, and what we were doing when I was running Rune Lords is we had a series of web cameras set up and a screen for Matt. Now we've got it, we're running Roll20 as our main battle mat, and so Matt sees the screen exactly the same way we do. And it's been going fairly smooth because Jeff isn't the only person that's controlling at the table. Usually Jay will also have a laptop and he will be logged into Roll20, so he will have some control over the players that are moving around. I would like a little more control. We don't have a touch screen. We have a flat screen that is laying on its back and in a box. I don't like the loss of control of being able to move my character and instead having to direct exactly where I want to go or just kind of hover my finger over the screen. That's a little bit of a loss. I would prefer the tangible. But the other thing that's done is it's kind of messed with my head as an RPG consumer, because this is the first campaign that I didn't have to put any thought into what miniature I would use for my character. And ultimately that hasn't changed too much, but it was a weird realization when it was like, okay, the campaign's about to start, so should I do a Bones? Should I go for Hero Forge? Oh, I don't need anything. Or it was also around the same time Alex was commissioning his own miniature, and I was like, oh, is this a character that I'm committed to enough that I would want to go that route, or is obscure enough that I wouldn't be able to find a miniature like that?
Man, Alex's mini. If you guys haven't seen this or checked it out, go check out the blog a while ago for Alex's custom-made miniature. I forget the company he worked with, but he had one custom digitally sculpted. I mean, the price tag was crazy, several $100. To get
it was several hundred?
Yes.
I did not realize that.
Yeah, totally. But he got his character, Kirin, I think is the name of the character, the iconic kitsune that appears in a lot of his products. And it looks fantastic, and it's exactly his character. It's probably the ultimate personification of the miniatures. And I've obsessed sometimes with the character minis, trying to get one perfect. I mean, my titular Perram character that I use in my home game is like, I've probably been through 24 different miniatures trying to get the perfect one, and and only about like 3 in, I had already resorted to like kit bashing things together and doing custom putty and paint jobs and such, and like filing off sections. Yeah, so even I can't justify slapping down $500 for one miniature. Not happening.
Well, the money I saved buying a miniature, I spent on art that I used for the custom icon in Roll20.
Ooh.
And I'm not I'm not a visual thinker, and so I've never been that picky about the miniature that I use for my character. As long as I have association between the miniature I'm using and my character, that's good enough for me. Whereas this is one of the few times I really feel like I know my character's face, I know what she looks like, what clothes she's generally wearing, or that what clothes she wore that one time that someone took a picture of her.
In the past.
So, yes. There's magic. I'm sure there's some kind of Polaroid cantrip.
Somebody stole her. Somebody stopped time and painted her.
Well, she's very slow, so someone could have had time to just draw her when she was walking towards them. All right, we've got 4 more questions in the environment.
All right, we might have to lightning round these because we are coming up on time.
Okay.
Okay, just give them in order. I guess it don't matter at this point.
All right, 41. Have you ever played an RPG session where the GM wore a cape, as is often represented on TV shows that include an RPGing character? Has your GM ever worn anything distinctive during a game? Would you enjoy a GM wearing something distinctive, or would you think it's silly and distracting? Ari has a GMing cloak for when she was running Kingmaker, but it was... there was an irony to it. It is a reference to how a GM is portrayed rather than something that she actually feels she needs. Although I do think she feels it gives her a little more authority around the table. So it's irony that's leaking into actual appreciation.
I've never done it, and it would really distract me. I mean, wearing RPG t-shirts is about the limit of it that we do here. Occasionally somebody will have like a single prop, but it's just something hanging around the game room. We had a pirate hat once that one of the characters wore, but I mean nothing that was ever intentionally meant to be worn to elicit any sort of immersion, and I would find that terribly distracting, especially if it was just one person doing it, and due to the stigma as well. I mean, if you're going to go full LARP, more power to you, but that's a different style of play entirely, where that is a core to the aesthetic. But I'm not going to put a pointy hat on when I'm going to run a game. I wear my pancake hat, and I always wear my pancake hat.
All right, number 46 is, do you enjoy music during an RPG? So it's similar to the sound effects question we had earlier.
Yeah,
I think we can
skip it.
More than lightning round it, we can skip right over it. 48. Have you played in an RPG session with other efforts to set a tone in the environment beyond miniatures, lights, and sounds? Can you imagine an RPG session be enhanced by other props or scents or other theatrics? What would you like to try during an RPG session that you've never experienced? I think anyone can just listen to last episode and get a better perspective on this than either of us have experience with. All right, ready to do number 50. This is the last one in the environment round, and then we might still have time for a couple of other lightning round things. We'll see. Does it matter to you if you have a regular place to play RPGs, or is any reasonable place space fine, even if the same campaign has to hop from locale to locale?
It matters a lot to
me. Agreed.
Yeah. I play away games and I play home games. When I'm playing away games, I like to play the same spot. I like to play to the point that I'd like to have my table reserved. Darn it. But for my home games, man, it has to be my home. It has to be the game room. There's a reason I spent 2 years building the thing.
Yep, and there's a reason that I like, or that finding a game space was an emphasis for me and Tina when we were looking at homes, because we've done the hopping around, going from different places, only having a short stint in a place. That's for high school role players, Perram. I'm past that point in my life. I want a place that I know is my RPG home. I can play in other places. I just don't want to be a nomadic player in a single campaign. No. I have my gaming roots now. They are set, and I am happy about it.
Get off my dicey lawn.
I was thinking more mature than curmudgeon-y, but sure.
All right. Okay. It is 10:44. Let's say we do 2 more.
Okay. Do you want to randomly determine them?
Yes. From section 4. We haven't done a lot from 4.
We have not.
Question 1.
We have already done this one, though.
Okay.
Name a
Question
movie you don't
7.
like. 7. How much backstory do you normally give your character? It says PCs or major NPC. Why? How would you feel about being asked to produce a different amount, more or less?
I have done it in all different varieties of ways over the courses of play. I've done the 10 pages of backstory for a character. I have done the couple of sentences at the top of a character sheet and go with the flow of a character. Anymore, I favor the G.I. Joe card method that you mentioned in your early,
file card.
yeah, the file card method. Or more specifically, I hand people an index card and I say, tell me what's important about your character. Or sometimes I structure it with like pre-written questions and then not the same questions for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
But the basic gist of it is, listen, there's a whole lot about your character that probably exists and is important to you, but there's not going to be time to address it all during the course of play, especially if I have to be moving the spotlight. And the fewer players I have at the table, the more I can flesh those out. But what is key? What is your character? If somebody were to make your Wikipedia page, what would appear on it? I mean, if you were going, if this was the movie in your life, what would the narrator be saying?
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I care about.
My Crown of Thorns. What was the horror campaign in Ustalav? What is the name of the adventure path in Ustalav? I am drawing a blank.
I'm drawing a blank now too, though I wouldn't have. Darn it.
Yeah. Anyway, so while you look that up, my character in that, basically his entire backstory was that at one point his family went crazy and he had to kill them all in self-defense. And that was my entire backstory, and that informed how I played that character. It was enough. And I've seen people with the pages and pages of backstory, and I as a player have no use for that information. I don't know why someone needs that much information to play the character. And maybe they don't. Maybe it's really just they enjoy writing a backstory and they are ready to pick up right where that backstory leaves off. But one of the other reasons I have trouble making an interesting backstory that long, besides just I have no drive to, this would be something I have to deliberately choose to do, is that I already find first level characters fairly impotent. So I have to be finding interesting things this character does before he was even a first level character. Like he is starting this game with 0 experience, and if that backstory contained anything that I feel like he would actually get experience points for, I feel like I'm cheating. I feel like, no, it doesn't make sense. Carrion Crown, thank you, people in chat. I said, I think I said Crown of Thorns. I was almost there, except not thorns, dead things. My current character has a little more backstory than most because she's haunted by her dead brother, and so the dead brother has more backstory than she does, and I've found it a bit of a hindrance because every now and then most of the other PCs in the party know her through her dead brother, and so I've had to stop and reference the backstory I wrote for that brother because I don't play him. He's my motivation, but the facts about him I don't keep in mind, I don't get right, and I don't want to just improvise because I know that some of those things are established and that things about the relationships matter, or the facts matter to those other relationships. And so I kind of get frustrated a little bit at the fact that I've got more backstory than usual for this character.
I actually don't like it when players hand me a whole lot of backstory either, as a GM. Especially if I've tried to set the solicitation that this is going to be how we do backstories, and then they insist on giving me 20 pages anyway.
Yep.
That's not welcome. I appreciate enthusiasm, though. At least that tells me they're invested. It's just a headache that I have to deal with. But it's like writing a story. I do not even. I don't know who to attribute this quote to, but basically it goes, what is the most interesting thing that's ever happened to your character, and why isn't this story about that? The story we're about to tell will be the most interesting thing to ever happen to your character. And if you have written me a story that's so much more important to your character than what we're playing, then why are we playing this? Why aren't we playing your background?
Matt and I are on very opposite spectrums of backstories, and in Carrying Crown, before I played Valter, I played an elf paladin, and his backstory was that he was an elf paladin. He was like a military man. He went off on a tour, but before he went on a tour, he fell in love with a human woman. They had a baby, and when he came back from the tour, it had been a human's lifetime, and so now he had a disenfranchised son who hated him, and he was a widower because the lifetime difference. Like I'm always fascinated by half elves because it means one of their parents is going to die very young from their point of view, and one of their parents is going to like lap them, or sorry, they're going to lap one of their parents in maturity, and so I was kind of playing on that. And Matt was the first GM before he handed the reins for Carrying Crown over to Tina. And after I gave up that character because I just wasn't enjoying the mechanics side of it, and after he gave it up because he wasn't enjoying GMing, he told me that he had a half elf in mind from later in the story that he was going to make be my son. And I did not appreciate that. I would not have liked having my backstory brought into the story, but I know he was doing that because that's exactly the kind of thing that he wished I would do more often, but I have no interest in bringing backstories into the story. Backstory is everything that happened up until the story. Let that dictate your character, but not the plot.
You need some of it, though. You can't just be a cardboard cutout with elf written on it.
No, yeah. This is all part of how the player plays the character, and then the character's actions are influencing the story, and so if the character's backstory are influencing the actions, then the character's actions are, by one step removed, influencing the story. That's how I see it. I don't like taking... Like, I actually get really frustrated when I'm reading a book, and it's like, oh, and these two characters knew each other from past life. It's like, there's millions of people. Like, Star Wars does this far too often for my taste. It's like, there's billions of people out there. How are these two people intersecting in a way that's not just because they are geographically where they grew up? Like, I don't like improbable things like that happening. That's one of the reasons I like RPGs, because probability is dictated by dice.
Well, I mean, even in my life, I will occasionally run into people that this meeting is just a 1 in a million chance of somebody that I should never have saw again. But those are the rare exceptions, not something that happens to every main character.
Yeah.
All right, last question.
Oh, all right.
Last question.
Oh, actually, we've got a question in chat. A couple of them. Let's just double check this. So Bastille says, my LGM used the backstories from the characters to make the adventure. Yeah, so we kind of just covered how I would not appreciate that either as a GM or as a player. But I understand that there are people with, possibly even a majority of people have very different perspectives on that than I do. Fate Spectre, I had a campaign fall apart because multiple players wrote extensive backstories and were entirely uninterested in the plot. Yeah, okay.
That's a problem. I've seen that happen before. I mean, especially if they're only interested in their own backstory and tried to get it expressed. You got to share the spotlight. This is a group storytelling thing. If your backstories are awesome and tied into the plot, great! If they're not, don't force it.
And finally, Painlord PFS says, Ryan, I have no idea why you're not playing more play-by-post. Someday you'll get there, and your vision of the game's possibilities will change. I'm interested in having you on the show, Painlord, and I believe I made that decision years ago and have never followed up on it. Painlord and I had a conversation at PaizoCon one time about the possibilities of play-by-post, and a lot of it is about changing the narrative. You can have like internal monologues and whatnot, and that fascinates me for another person's game. But as I said earlier, I don't even like hearing what the other characters are doing when when my character's not in the same room as them. So it's like it's very different from my comfort zone, but something I am fascinated by. So Perram, remind me the next time we're like, oh, who should we have as a guest? That I want Painlord or somebody. I want to do a play-by-post episode.
Right. I do not have the patience for play-by-posts, but I appreciate what you're talking about, Painlord. I find that I get all the benefits with none of the downside doing online text RP that's live. Like text-only RP, like in Muds or Mushes or things like that. particularly the mushes and the mucks, where it's focused on the RP, not the game systems. These are old Telnet console styles of role playing, and there's
Yeah.
modern
I'm
like
familiar
chat
with some
room.
of those terms, but vaguely. And I have a feeling there are some people that are just like, mucks and mush and what?
Okay, so
And we don't really
basically
have time to
these
dive
are
into them.
these are chat rooms that are set up that are dedicated to role playing. They usually have their own built-in sessions. They usually have some GMs that help you get your character started. But you basically couple up with a player or two when you log in. You agree to have a role-playing session. You have a role-playing session with that group or that player. You advance some sort of plot based on your backstories or the rules of the game or what's going on, and then you come back later and you try to hook up with different players to have different stories. They're available for all fandoms and they're great. And they let you have these big long texts with backstories and internal monologues and stuff, and you're waiting 5 minutes between posts, not days.
All right, you want to do one more question, Perram?
One more question.
All right, what are we doing?
Section 4 again.
Okay, story beats.
Question 2.
2. If you had to choose on a specific night between a satisfying conclusion to a storyline or a major advancement of the rule-supported effectiveness of your character, which would you be more likely to select? What factors could alter that situation?
These are two polar opposite things.
They are.
Ultimately, I would want to advance the storyline and explore the storyline because my character can level up later.
Okay. And is there anything that would factor into that situation? Or any factor that could alter the situation, sorry.
Oh, if I didn't like the story, it would be my subtle hint that we need to move on if I chose something that didn't further it. And that's something I will drop storylines. I will just if this major character arc or campaign arc is just not working out, we just drop it like a bad habit and move on to the next one. Life's too short to play bad games.
Mm-hmm. So, what factors could alter that situation? Early campaign for a couple of reasons. One, I don't want satisfying conclusions that early on, and two, I don't want to be first or second level for very long. I rag on first level. Second level is better, but third level is the earliest that a character is in, like, is anywhere near the sweet spot. Like, it's when you can be making the clever decisions and actually have the mechanics to back them up. And so, early on, give me a couple of easy victories, or not easy victories, but give me a couple of victories that I've earned, and that's really all the satisfying conclusion to the storyline. Otherwise, at that point, I am wide-eyed and I want to learn as much as possible about the things I will be facing in the future, but I don't want to be dealing with the mechanics of being a first or second level character. After that, that's when I want to start seeing some conclusions. I want to reach a level where I feel like I'm comfortable with the character mechanically. Now let's start resolving some of the threads and start building to the giant knot ball that is a concluded campaign.
All right. Well, I think we are running out of time tonight. We had a good, fun episode.
We did. We owe a lot of thanks to Owen KC Stephens. Not just, if he had said he didn't want us doing this because it kind of ruins his blog content, I would have 100% understood and respected him for that. But not only, when we asked him if we could use his questions for an episode, not only was he happy with it, but he offered us a preview of the questions that aren't even up yet. That is awesome. That really helped make this episode. And also what I liked about this is, Perram, we've been doing this for over 100 episodes. You've basically been a regular co-host for at least 130 of them, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
We've had a lot of conversations about RPGs, and we've even covered some of the ground that we talked about tonight, but there was a lot of ground that we have never covered before, and I feel like I know you better as a gamer from this one episode than from a lot of the last couple of years.
Thanks.
Forget couple of years. 7 years?
7 going on 8.
Yep.
We've been doing this show for almost 8 years, guys. Wow, that's crazy.
Mm-hmm.
All right. And if you got we covered a lot of questions, but we did not cover nearly all of them, and there are 50 more to be released. So go check out Owen KC Stephens' blog at owenkcstephens.com, and you will maybe have some fun with your own gaming group tossing these around and learning what you guys like and don't like, and that might help you discover how you guys want to do your next campaigns. Go have it, check it out.
Also, thanks a lot to the chat. You were very interactive this episode. I think we were able to keep up with a lot of the major things that were being said in the chat before, but for anyone that's listened to our show and hasn't been in on chat before, this would have been an ideal situation. So I know there's a couple of names that I don't recognize or aren't regulars in chat. I'm glad you guys made it out.
Yep, definitely. Chat, you guys rock. Please, for those of you listening that are post-fact or watching us on YouTube, try coming to the Twitch chat if you can. It's a great experience. We get a lot out of it. You guys basically have become the third chair of this show collectively and help keep us on our games and make sure we don't just say the same things over and over again, which we would be in danger of doing in a silo.
Okay. Until next time, I'm Ryan Costello.
And I'm Jefferson J. Thacker, also known as Perram.
And you are always welcome in our private sanctuary.
No, we're not.
No, wow, where did that come from?
I don't know where that came from.
Wow. Wow.
Alex is going to come in here and beat you for stealing his tagline.
It's my tagline.
You gave it up. You passed the cow on.
Fair. All right. Well, they're coming up on their 300th episode, so I have a feeling I will be making an appearance on their show soon enough. But yes, no. If you want to find the path, you need no direction.
Bye, guys.